Welcome back to Dark Sleep Radio. Today, I've got a story about a solo survey job that took an unexpected turn. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let me know. The old Cold Springs military testing area was a restricted zone, fenced off with warning signs. My job was to map the terrain for an environmental study, and I was using a drone to capture images for a 3D model. It was mid-October, with a dry, clear day and a growing wind. Around 3:30 p.m., I was about 3 miles from the closest road, surrounded by a dusty desert valley with red soil and low juniper trees. The autumn chill was setting in, but the sun still warmed my neck. I launched the drone, set up my flight paths, and started monitoring the live feed on my tablet. It was a standard drone, nothing special, but reliable. I'd flown it hundreds of times in similar terrain. About 20 minutes into the survey, something strange happened. While adjusting waypoints, the screen flickered and the GPS signal dropped. At first, I wasn't worried. This area had weird dead zones, and the military's radio towers could cause interference. The drone was still transmitting video, so I assumed it was just a brief glitch. But then the video feed froze, and I lost all control. The drone seemed to hover in place, with GPS coordinates no longer updating. I tried everything, rebooting the controller, resetting the connection, moving around to find a better signal. Nothing worked. For the next hour, I watched the screen go black, then attempt to reconnect. This wasn't my first lost drone, but usually it would land or the signal would return. Not this time. As the sun began to dip below the hills and the wind picked up, kicking dust into the air, I packed my gear. I wasn't about to get stranded near that place after dark. The sooner I could get back to the road, the better. I was heading back to the truck around 5:15 p.m. when something strange happened. There on the passenger seat sat my drone, the same one I was certain I'd left at the launch site. The case was open, as if someone had just placed it there. My heart started racing. Carefully checking the drone, I found no damage or dirt. It seemed impossible that it could have returned on its own. The battery was still about half full. I powered up the tablet and loaded the footage from the drone's internal memory. The video was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It started at the moment the signal dropped, but the camera angle was completely wrong. Instead of sweeping landscape shots, the drone was pointed straight up at the sky. High above, a smooth black shape hovered almost motionless. No blinking lights, no sound, just this featureless matte black object, too high to be any known aircraft. At first, I thought it might be a bird or cloud, but the shape was too solid and uniform. It remained perfectly still for the entire 40-minute clip, as if watching me. The sun set during the video, the sky darkening to twilight, yet the shape never changed or moved. Toward the end, the camera slowly tilted down and seemed to move away, almost like someone was regaining control. Then the video cut off. I checked the timestamps. The drone had been missing exactly an hour. I watched the footage repeatedly, finding nothing else. No radio chatter, no engine noise, no lights or flashes, just that black shape against the darkening sky. The feeling was hard to describe. Not quite fear, but an unsettling calm, like being observed by something that acknowledged your presence without concern. I decided not to tell my coworkers. They'd just laugh or claim I'd simply lost the signal. The next day, I returned to the launch site, searching for any signs of where the drone might have landed. Nothing. The desert was completely undisturbed, as if the drone had never left my hands. I contacted the local ELD and nearby military base. No unusual activity was reported, but I know what I saw. I was out on the back porch of my place in Flagstaff, Arizona, doing some night sky photography. The full moon hung in a clear sky, softened by a thin haze around 10:30 p.m. in early spring. As a longtime photographer focused on landscapes and celestial scenes, I had my camera mounted on a tripod, carefully adjusting settings to capture the moon's craters and shadows. The neighborhood was peaceful, just occasional distant dog barks and far-off cars. The air felt chilly, but still, perfect conditions for crisp photography. While looking through the viewfinder, something strange caught my attention. A small dark shape darted across the moon's surface with startling precision. Its movement was unnaturally direct, almost mechanical, too fast for a bird or plane, cutting a perfectly straight line from one edge to another. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were deceiving me or if a lens smudge was responsible. Scanning the sky with my naked eye revealed nothing unusual. Yet through the camera lens, this mysterious object was unmistakably present, slicing across the lunar landscape. I frantically clicked the shutter, hoping to capture it again, but it appeared only in that single frame. Later, I loaded the photos onto my computer and zoomed in. The object was clear, a dark, solid shape moving left to right with sharp, unblurred edges. When I showed Marissa, she casually suggested it might be a bug or lens artifact. I tried discussing it with friends who share my interest in unusual phenomena, but the footage remained largely unseen. Now and then, I find myself pondering that unexplained moment. What was that object? Why did the drone lose signal when it appeared? How did it end up back in my truck without my notice? Some mysteries seem destined to remain unsolved. Yet I continue flying drones, always scanning the sky, half hoping and half dreading another glimpse of that enigmatic black shape. I kept thinking about the strange photo I'd taken, so I started spending my evenings on the porch, camera ready, watching the moon every night for a week. Nothing unusual appeared, just the normal craters and lunar landscape. I asked my neighbor Pete, who's often up late, if he'd seen anything out of the ordinary. He hadn't noticed a thing. One night near midnight, with a partly cloudy sky and just a sliver of moon visible, I was sitting outside drinking coffee when the streetlights started acting weird. They flickered randomly. One would dim for a second and then brighten, while others remained steady. This went on for about 5 minutes before stopping completely. When I looked toward the hills beyond our neighborhood, I saw something truly bizarre. A faint, pulsing bluish glow hovered just past the ridge. It wasn't moving like an aircraft and wasn't bright enough to be a spotlight or flare. I tried to capture it with my camera, but by the time I focused, the light had vanished. I told Marissa about it the next morning. She suggested it was probably a car reflection or a drone, though she hadn't seen anything herself. Strangely, when I mentioned this to other neighbors, no one else reported seeing the light or the street light flickering. A few nights later, my phone suddenly died with a low buzzing sound, despite being fully charged just an hour earlier. It wouldn't restart for almost 20 minutes. Later that same night, I went outside and heard a soft, constant humming, like distant machinery, but with no identifiable source. I walked around trying to locate the sound, but found nothing. The next morning, I discovered a tiny scratch on my camera's lens cover that definitely hadn't been there before. I couldn't explain how it got there. I was hiking alone near an old military testing ground by Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. The area is huge, mostly desert and scrub, with some parts fenced off, but still used by locals. I wasn't chasing myths, I just wanted a day away from everything. No phone, no noise, just sun and sand. It was early September, with a clear sky and dry heat that wasn't yet brutal. I wore a hat, boots, and carried a day pack with water and a first aid kit. Days later, strange things started happening. The microwave clock would blink off randomly. My car radio picked up odd static bursts that didn't match any station. Even my laptop slowed down unexpectedly, though antivirus scans showed nothing. About 10 days after taking a photo, I was on the porch watching the moon through my camera. It was half full, bright and sharp. I spotted the same dark, thin object crossing the moon's surface again, moving fast and straight. This time, it seemed closer and more defined. I called Marissa to look, but she didn't see it. Pete just laughed, suggesting I needed new glasses. I kept taking pictures. The object crossed the frame 3 times that night, always at the same speed and angle. The next night, I set up a time-lapse camera, expecting to capture it again. But when I reviewed the footage, the moon moved normally. No strange shapes or shadows appeared. I don't know what I saw in those photos or that night on the porch. No one else ever witnessed the object, the strange lights, or heard the humming. The more I tried to explain it, the less sense it made. Eventually, I stopped going out with the camera at night. Sometimes I still check those old photos, wondering if it was just a trick of light or a glitch. But I can't explain what was crossing the moon that night or why no one else saw it. I was trekking through the desert, following footprints in the sand that seemed recently made. The landscape stretched endlessly, silent and still. About 2 hours into my walk, something caught my eye on the ground ahead. What looked initially like scrap metal turned out to be a wristwatch, but not like any I'd seen before. Its case was warped and half melted, as if exposed to extreme heat or a corrosive substance. The glass face was cracked, yet the hands continued moving steadily, ticking away unperturbed. When I picked it up, the watch felt unexpectedly heavy and warm. Examining it closely, I found no brand or model number, just some scratched-off markings. The second hand moved with an almost hypnotic consistency. Around the watch, footprints told a strange story. They weren't mine, and they appeared fresh. More bizarrely, they stopped abruptly about 10 feet away, right in the middle of open sand. No trail led away, no drag marks, no logical explanation for the sudden disappearance. I scanned the surrounding desert, nothing but rocks and sand in every direction. No buildings, no vehicles, no other people. The silence was oppressive, as if the landscape itself was holding its breath. When I called out, my voice sounded jarringly loud in the empty space. No response came. Slipping the watch into my pocket, I walked toward where the footprints vanished, searching for any hidden path, a vehicle, or a cave. But there was nothing, just an unbroken expanse of sand and rocks. An unsettling sensation grew. Someone seemed to be watching, though I saw nothing. No movement, no sound. My skin prickled with unease. As the sun dipped toward the horizon and desert temperatures plummeted, I rested on a rock. I pulled out the watch again. Its ticking seemed different now, faster, almost urgent, like the hands were racing to catch up with something unknown. That night, I made camp nearby, my sleeping bag and stove set up, but unable to shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. The desert silence was thick and unnatural. No crickets, no wind, just an eerie stillness enveloping me. I kept looking back at the spot where I'd found the watch, my unease growing with each passing moment. Around midnight, my phone flickered to life unexpectedly. The battery had been dead for hours, yet the screen glowed bright white with no messages or notifications. Before I could touch it, the screen went black. Then I heard it, a low, directionless hum like an idling engine, seeming to rise from the ground itself. Stepping out of the tent, I scanned the landscape. Nothing moved. Stars hung motionless above the desert's empty expanse. The hum stopped abruptly, as if someone had hit mute. The next morning, I packed quickly and retraced my steps. Near where the footprints had inexplicably ended, I noticed something strange. Faint marks in the sand, carefully dragged and leading straight down into the ground. When I knelt to trace the shallow gouges, I realized they were fresh, yet inexplicably undisturbed by wind or shifting sand. I pocketed the watch again. This time it felt cooler, its ticking settling into a regular rhythm. During the drive home, I turned it over in my hands, wrestling with unanswered questions. How could a watch melt and still function? Why had the footprints vanished without explanation? What made that night feel so fundamentally wrong? At home, I left the watch on the kitchen table. It haunted me, the second hand occasionally skipping or moving backward. Online searches yielded nothing. Eventually, I tucked it away in a box of old camping gear. I didn't want to lose it, but I couldn't bear looking at it anymore. I still think about that day, about how something inexplicable can lie waiting in the dirt, ready to be discovered. How an ordinary object like a watch can hold a silence deeper than the desert itself. Back in early March, I was hauling PVC pipe from Boise to Reading. The night was cold but clear. I'd left late around 7 p.m., planning to drive until midnight and rest near Highway 139. The night was quiet in County's pine forest, with dry grass and cattle fencing stretching out around me. I'd pulled off on a wide gravel shoulder just south of Tiesta, a spot I'd used before. No official parking, but no signs and no traffic at that hour. I remember checking the time, 12:13 a.m., and logging it in the ELD. Facing south, I parked, set the brake, killed the engine, and climbed into the sleeper. Tired, I had a protein bar, put on a podcast, and fell asleep quickly. Suddenly, I was awake. Something felt off, though I couldn't hear anything specific. It was like my body sensed something before my brain did. The cab was dark, with only the red dash clock light visible. I sat listening. No wind, no traffic, not even a bug tapping the windshield, just an unnatural stillness. I opened the curtain, moved to the front, and turned on the dome light. Everything looked normal. My keys were in their tray, nothing had shifted. It was cold, but not freezing. After turning off the light, I opened the driver's side door and noticed something strange. The rig was tilted slightly left. Not dramatically, but noticeable to someone who's driven as long as I have. I knew the shoulder had been flat when I parked. I always double-check the level. Stepping out, I surveyed the area. Something was wrong. The gravel under the front tires looked different. Darker patches where the weight had shifted, as if recently disturbed. Looking behind the trailer, I realized the back end was angled differently. The entire rig had moved, maybe 20 or 30 feet back from where I'd originally parked, nudged slightly into the brush. I walked around the passenger side, checking carefully. No tire marks, no drag, no footprints. But then I saw them. About 6 feet behind the rear wheels, 2 deep indentations in the gravel. Not gouges or tire tracks, but smooth, symmetrical depressions. Each was about a foot across, shaped like ovals and roughly 6 inches deep. No discernible pattern, just these unexplained marks in the ground. I was driving a long, quiet stretch of road, parked on a flat gravel area near the white line. When I came back to my truck, something felt off immediately. The rig was now positioned differently, about 30 feet from where I originally left it, nestled closer to the brush. The strangest part wasn't just the new location. The surrounding area was completely undisturbed. Weeds, a soda can, everything exactly as I'd left it. No tracks led to this new spot, just 2 oval indentations behind my truck, unlike any tire marks I'd ever seen. I studied the scene carefully. The trailer seals were still locked, brake lines intact, lights working, nothing seemed missing or damaged, but the positioning was impossible. Who could have moved a massive truck 30 feet backwards into brush without leaving a trace? No tracks, no signs of towing. A chill ran up my spine. The absolute silence was unnerving. No night sounds, no animals, just dead quiet and my own breath fogging in the cold. Dark tree shapes barely visible under starlight. Something felt wrong. I didn't want to stay. Slowly, I climbed back into the truck and eased toward the road. The gravel felt softer than it should, like it hadn't been driven on recently. I kept my movements calm, avoiding panic. On the highway, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see something in the brush. Nothing was there, just the red glow of my taillights. At a rest stop about 10 miles down the road, I thoroughly checked the truck. No damage, no signs of tampering. Strangely, the oval marks were now completely gone. No residue, no marks on the tires, no evidence of how the truck could have been moved. By early afternoon, I dropped the load in Reading. I didn't mention anything to dispatch. Maybe I just misremembered where I'd parked. We were camping near the Black Rock Desert, a few hours north of Reno in late August. The heat was dry and didn't cling to you during the day, but nights cooled quickly, making a hoodie by the fire necessary. My wife Heather, our kids Ellie and Josh, and I had taken a week off to explore somewhere more remote than typical campgrounds. We found a flat spot near a dry lake bed, not quite on the playa, but close enough to stargaze without light pollution. The closest paved road was 40 minutes away, and we were completely isolated, no cell service, no other campers for miles. Our campsite was a small sandy dip ringed by sage brush. We set up a 6-person dome tent, 2 folding tables, and a pop-up shade, anchoring everything with rocks. The kids had their own sleeping bags, and we all shared the tent. The first few nights were perfect. Big skies, quiet evenings, maybe a distant coyote call. We cooked on the camp stove, roasted marshmallows, played cards, the usual camping routine. It was the kind of trip where time became fluid, measured by daylight rather than a watch. The third night was different. Wind picked up after dinner, not strong enough to damage the tent, but enough to make the walls flex. We tightened the guidelines before bed. The wind's sound over the lake bed was peculiar, a steady, low-pitched hum that seemed to emerge from the terrain's acoustics. We settled in around 10, with Heather and me in the middle, kids on either side. The lantern was off, stars visible through the tent's mesh. Later, something felt off. The gravel outside seemed different, as if recently placed. That stretch of road isn't used much at night, with few cameras and minimal signal. If someone was out there, they weren't local and weren't driving anything familiar. I still pass that spot sometimes, always checking. I've marked the milepost on a sticky note in the dash, but I've never seen those strange indentations again. My eyes opened suddenly, and I felt completely alert. No grogginess, no stiffness, just awake. Heather and the kids were still asleep, and everything inside the tent looked normal. The lantern sat exactly where I'd left it. But something felt off. I sat up and studied the tent, noticing immediately that the main zipper was fully closed. Not just zipped, but with the pull tabs tucked outside in a way that would make it impossible to open from inside without reaching through the mesh sleeve. This wasn't how we'd left it before going to sleep. My first instinct was to blame the wind, but outside was dead still. No sound, no movement. I reached for my watch, set beside my sleeping bag. 2:46 a.m. Something didn't feel right. I had a strange sense it was earlier, maybe 12:30 or 1. I turned on the lantern, creating a soft glow. Heather stirred and asked what was wrong. I told her I wasn't sure, just that something felt weird. She sat up and checked her watch. 2:46 a.m. Exactly. We checked Ellie's and Josh's watches, which we'd placed on the gear bag between them. All 4 watches showed 2:46, despite being different brands and purchased at different times. This coincidence felt unsettling. Near the tent entrance, I noticed faint impressions in the dust. Not quite footprints, but shallow scuffs, as if someone had walked through in socks or soft shoes. They weren't ours, too small for my feet, too large for Ellie's, just different. I pulled the zipper and opened the flap. Outside, the moon hung low and orange. The visibility was decent, showing scrub brush, tables, and the fire pit. But something about the light felt wrong, too flat. The shadows seemed misplaced. Behind the camp stove, no shadow existed where one should have been. I was driving east on Route 190, cutting through the Mojave sometime past 11 p.m. The air felt dry and warm through the crack in the driver's window, even at night in mid-August. We were camping near the lake bed. I put my hand in front of the tent and saw nothing, no shadow on the ground. That struck me hard. Heather came out, whispering to keep from waking the kids. She noticed it too. The moon was bright, but no shadows appeared. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I listened. Complete silence. No wind, no bugs, no cooler creaking, no distant coyote yips like previous nights. Just absolute quiet. Looking past the brush toward the lake bed, I saw a faint glow hovering about 20 feet above the ground. It was like a stadium light, but without any beam or source. Just a pale, steady light, roughly the size of a car hood. I didn't point. I didn't speak. Heather gripped my wrist, and I think she saw it too. We stood motionless, not from being frozen, but from an instinctive sense that we shouldn't move. It was similar to the feeling you get when a large animal is nearby in darkness, and your body knows before your mind does. After what seemed like 5 minutes, though time was hard to gauge, the glow slowly dimmed and disappeared. Suddenly, the wind rushed back, as if someone had unpaused it. It swept across the tent, kicking dust against our legs. The brush rustled, and we both flinched. That seemed to break the strange spell. We went inside, zipped the tent from the inside, and sat in silence. My watch still read 2:46. Morning came, and everything looked untouched. The camp was fine, with no animal tracks around the perimeter, but all 4 of our watches had stopped at the same time, still showing 2:46 despite the sun being up. We tried tapping them, resetting, changing batteries. Nothing worked. Heather didn't want to discuss it. The kids slept through the entire incident, and we never told them. We packed up early and left that afternoon, driving back quietly. I still have that watch in a drawer somewhere. It has never worked again. I was driving my 2011 Civic from Ridge Rest toward Pahrump, planning to stay with my cousin Kyle for a couple days before heading to Vegas. The road was a desolate stretch. No lights, no towns, barely any. Signs, just scattered Joshua trees and hills fading into darkness. About an hour past Trona, I hadn't seen another car or headlights for miles, and the radio had long since dissolved into static. Around 11:40, something strange began to happen. A bright white light flashed on the right side of the road, far out near the horizon. It wasn't like lightning. This was different. More like a giant camera flash, precise, solid, and silent. The light illuminated the low hills for just a second before vanishing. At that exact moment, my headlights inexplicably dimmed, as if someone had briefly lowered a dimmer switch. I muttered, "What the hell?" and sat up straighter. The battery light didn't come on, and the engine seemed fine. Maybe just a weird voltage dip, I thought. An old car quirk. But then it happened again. 3 minutes later, another flash in the same spot with the same silent brightness. Again, my headlights dimmed in perfect synchronization. Now I was getting nervous. I tried flicking the headlights off and on. Nothing changed. I slowed from 70 to 55 miles per hour. My phone showed no service, just an SOS where signal bars should have been. I kept watching the right side of the road, scanning the dark hills and desert brush. No towers, no buildings, nothing. A third flash came, maybe a little closer this time, a perfect rectangular brightness along the horizon. Once more, my headlights dimmed in lockstep with the light. No sound, no atmospheric disturbance, just this eerie, precise phenomenon. My knuckles were white, gripping the steering wheel. Something was definitely not right. I was driving on a desert road, speed dropping as something strange caught my attention. The highway stretched empty around me, so I eased off to about 40 miles per hour. Something felt off. A mile later, I pulled onto the dirt beside the road, parking just far enough from the asphalt to avoid any passing trucks. Engine off, but parking lights on. I rolled down the window and listened. Total silence surrounded me. No crickets, no wind, just the soft ticking of my cooling engine. Then another flash lit up the sky. This time, I felt a subtle pressure in my chest, almost like a small, invisible thump. My parking lights blinked during the flash, just a fraction of a second. Curious, I killed all the lights and stepped out. The air was warm but unnaturally still. No breeze, not even the faintest desert whisper. I leaned against the car's hood, watching the hills where the light had originated. Nothing was visible, just flat darkness. After waiting about 10 minutes, I started wondering if this was some military exercise or an odd lightning phenomenon, despite the clear sky. Then a different light appeared. Not a sharp flash, but a soft, pulsing glow high in the sky. It blinked like a dying LED, on for a second, then off. 10 seconds later, it reappeared in another part of the sky. The light was silent and weirdly round, unlike any strobe or aircraft beacon. I watched, fascinated. It pulsed higher, blinking and seeming to jump locations. Always the same soft, white light. No tail, no streak, just appearing and disappearing, never in the same spot. Unnerved, I retreated to the car. Door open, I sat watching the sky. Time seemed to stand still. The pulses eventually stopped, and no more flashes came. When I finally started the engine and checked the dash clock, it read 112. I knew I'd pulled over just after midnight, precisely 11:50 when the first flash occurred. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling. Late September, I took the Cessna up from Red Bluff. Flying small, single-engine planes had been a hobby since college, mostly for weekend trips or clearing my head. That Sunday afternoon was perfect. Clear skies, light wind, visibility stretching for miles. I filed VFR and took off around 4:40 p.m., planning a quick P from Red Bluff to Lake Shasta and back. About 30 minutes into the flight, I was cruising at 6,500 feet just west of Lassen. The air was smooth, and radio chatter was minimal. I listened to NorCal approach, but there wasn't much happening. The sun hung low, casting a soft orange glow underneath the clouds in that distinctive late summer way. Then, I noticed something above me, maybe a few hundred feet higher. Another aircraft seemed to be coming up from behind, slightly offset to my left. Initially, I thought it was a twin-engine plane like a Baron or Piper Navajo, something with a narrow fuselage. The sun made details hard to distinguish. What struck me was its flight pattern. It wasn't passing me. Instead, it was pacing me precisely. I slowed down, pulling back the throttle to see what would happen. The aircraft adjusted instantly, maintaining the exact same relative distance, not gaining, not falling back, just hovering up there. Maybe 500 feet higher, maybe less. My own engine drowned out any potential sound from it. Later, driving back, something strange happened. I realized I'd been sitting somewhere for over an hour, though I was certain I'd only looked away from the clock for about 30 minutes. The time didn't add up, and I hadn't fallen asleep. I completed the drive without stopping, constantly checking the rearview mirror. A tightness persisted at the back of my neck, as if someone was watching. At Kyle's place, I said nothing about the experience. We spent the evening drinking and watching reruns. The next morning, I checked my headlights and battery. Everything seemed normal. The strangest part? The dash clock remained perfectly synchronized with my phone for the rest of the trip, never gaining or losing a second. I called out the unidentified traffic on the radio. Unidentified traffic at 11 high. Type unknown. Altitude unverified. No response came through. Looking up again, the shape remained. Its silhouette was bizarre. No visible wings like a typical fixed-wing aircraft. The body appeared smooth, almost molded, with no rivets or joints. Its flight pattern defied logic. Perfect horizontal movement, matching my position inch for inch. As I watched, trying to comprehend what I was seeing, the object displayed an unnatural stability. No wobbling, no yaw, no turbulence-induced buffeting. Just an unsettling, too perfect solidity. I banked gently right, thinking the sun might be playing tricks on my eyes. Instantly, it mirrored my movement. Same bank, same arc, staying high and left. Something felt wrong. My instruments were functioning normally. The engine ran smoothly. But an odd pressure began building, like a sudden cabin pressure drop, though I wasn't climbing. My ears popped twice, despite minimal altitude change. A soft static started underneath the radio's squelch, persisting even as I lowered the volume. Then it happened. In 1 second, the object was level above me, matching my heading. The next, it rotated, not banking or rolling, but pivoting nose down, tail up, defying gravity. It stood motionless in midair, as if space itself had no rules. Then, without warning, it vanished. No sound, no acceleration, no vapor trail, just gone. I scanned the sky, turning in a wide circle and climbing an additional 300 feet. Nothing, just clouds above the orange sun and an empty expanse. Keying up the radio, I reported in a measured tone, normal approach, November 28th, Niner Echo. Visual contact with unknown traffic at approximately 6,700 feet, southwest of Lassen. Faded from sight. No collision risk. Continuing VFR. After a brief pause, a different controller asked me to repeat. When I did, they confirmed they had no primary or secondary radar contact in my area, aside from my own aircraft. On the return loop, I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept checking mirrors, glancing outside windows, half expecting something to reappear. I was managing the night shift at Red Bluff Storage, just outside of Amarillo. It was early March, cold and clear, with my little space heater going under the desk and the wind rattling the siding. The facility has about 150 units, a chain-link perimeter fence, and 4 camera feeds, 2 on the gate, 1 on the back row near larger units, and 1 on the office. Nothing fancy, but it does the job. The night had been uneventful until that point. A guy named Troy had come by around 11 to grab some tools out of his unit, which wasn't unusual. He runs some kind of handyman business and works odd hours. After that, just silence. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the monitors all blinked. Not glitched exactly, but sort of popped like when you change HDMI channels and the signal cuts for a second. Just a quick flash of static across all 4 feeds, maybe half a second before they came right back. The power didn't go out. My computer stayed on. The lights were fine. I frowned at it, but didn't think much of it right away, marking the time on my little notepad in case I needed to check it later. A couple minutes after that, I noticed something weird on the back row camera. That feed faces the far lot where we keep larger boat and RV units. Its motion typically triggers at night, but it had just flipped to full record and was still. No cars, no people, no wind kicking up dust. Just a wide shot of the back fence and a few rows of corrugated metal doors. Something about the lighting looked off. Later, when I was flying, I couldn't get a strange movement out of my head. How unnatural it had looked when it flipped. It wasn't aerodynamic. It wasn't possible by any standard I knew. I landed around 6:10 p.m., parked, tied down, logged the flight, normal flight time, no mechanical issues. Nothing technically happened, so I didn't file a report. I didn't even tell anyone about it for a few days. But for weeks afterward, every time I went up, I kept scanning the sky for something following me. I kept thinking about how that thing knew exactly where I was, how it mimicked every little turn, every small speed change. It felt like it wasn't flying near me, but watching. I was reviewing security camera footage when something caught my eye. The scene looked off. The shadows seemed too soft, spread out in an unusual way. I leaned in closer, even switching off my desk lamp to get a better view. It reminded me of those old war documentaries where a blimp passes overhead, casting a gentle shade. Something big seemed to be hovering over the lot, diffusing the light without creating a sharp shadow. Curious, I stepped outside to check the pole light. The air was dry and sharp, the sky completely clear. I walked around the building, stood under the lamp, and looked up. Nothing. No sound, no movement. When I glanced back across the lot toward the fence, everything appeared normal. The light looked fine from outside. I was out there for maybe 2 minutes before returning to the office. The camera feed looked normal again, but I made a note of the time and flagged the recording to review later. I didn't actually pull the footage until the following afternoon during my next shift. Dana, the day manager, was the one who hit play while I was logging reports from the previous night. She called me over almost immediately. "Look at this," she said. We rolled back to 21:13, 10:45 a.m., showing the standard lot view. Then at 21:14, a sharp white flash appeared, not like lightning, but more like a camera flash right next to the lens. It was bright enough to white out the entire screen for a frame or two. What happened next still gives me chills. A shadow moved across the camera in a way I can't explain. It wasn't a bird or a drone. The movement was too smooth, drifting across fast but not in a hurry, like coasting on a current. With no visible edges, it was a huge, misshapen blur gliding from one corner to the other in about 3 seconds. The motion reminded me of watching a stingray underwater. The most unsettling part? Nothing on the lot reacted. No wind, no rattling, no power disruption, and complete silence. I was driving back from Flagstaff to Kingman late one night in October. My cousin's kid had a birthday, and I stuck around longer than I meant to. Helped clean up, talked to my uncle for a while. By the time I left, it was almost 11. The drive's a little under 2 hours if you're moving mostly I-40 through the desert. Not much traffic. I've done it 100 times. I wasn't in a rush. Weather was dry, cool. Moon was out but not full. My truck's got a dash cam, one of those VOAFO ones with front and rear views, records, and loops. I only installed it a few months earlier, after some guy ran a red light and tried to blame me. Now it just runs whenever the ignition's on. Nothing felt strange. Dana and I just sat there for a while watching it loop. She kept saying, "That's not a plane. That's not a plane." We checked the other camera off, caught the flash too. Reflected faintly on the metal siding. The gate cams didn't show much. They were facing the wrong direction, but they both blinked at the same time. I reported it up the chain like I was supposed to. Corporate didn't say much. Just told me to save the clip, back it up, and write a report. Later that week, I talked to Troy, the handyman guy. I asked if he noticed anything weird that night. He said no, but then he paused and said, "Well, my truck clock was off when I left. Said it was 2:41 when I pulled out, but my phone said 2:34. I thought it was just the cold messing with the battery." That struck me because I'd seen him leave on the feed right after the flash, like right after, and the whole time thing didn't match up exactly. 7 minutes isn't much, but still. That section of the feed is still saved in our backup. But when we tried to export it to a thumb drive, the file came out corrupted. We tried twice. Played fine on the internal system, but wouldn't transfer. Dana gave up. I didn't. I kept watching that clip for weeks. Nothing changed. No glitches, no cuts, just a flash and a shadow that shouldn't have been there. Those feeds, but the dust on the gravel doesn't even kick up. It's just this shadow, massive, and then it's gone. I still work nights. I still check the back row camera more than I need to. I haven't seen anything like it again, but I've had other flashes. Not as bright and no shadows, but once in a while, at almost the same time of night, the cameras blink again. And every time they do, I step outside and look up just to check. I was driving between Seligman and Ashfork, mostly alone on the road with an old Raymond Chandler audiobook playing and a Gatorade in the cup holder. 2 semis passed me along the way, but otherwise the journey was quiet. When I got home and parked in the driveway, I gathered my stuff and did what I always do, glance at the dash cam after shutting off the engine. Something was off. The screen was frozen, stuck on a single frame, instead of showing the usual goodbye message and powering down. The frame showed a black road with stars overhead. The timestamp read 12381, but my truck's clock said 1240. This bothered me because the camera usually syncs its time with the GPS, which I had set that morning. I tapped the screen, unplugged, and replugged it. It rebooted normally and started recording again with no visible damage. Inside, I plugged the SD card into my laptop to review the files. They typically save in 3-minute chunks. I found the last full clip ending at 12:38, followed by a partial file that had frozen. This clip was unusual, only 2 seconds long instead of the standard 3 minutes. When I opened it, the video started normally. A dark Igwe with center lines, desert brush on both sides, and stars filling the sky. No other headlights were visible. But on the very last frame, something strange happened. The sky went completely black. Not just the dash cam cutting off, but the stars themselves simply blinked out. I meticulously checked this, using video editing software to review frame by frame. Before that moment, the sky was crystal clear with dozens of stars and no clouds. Then, in an instant, no stars remained. The desert, road, and truck interior stayed the same, but the sky was just gone. The next file started at 12:41, as if 2 minutes had mysteriously vanished. The highway looked identical, still starry, still empty of other vehicles. Checking the truck's GPS log confirmed something was truly odd. According to the log, I traveled just 0.1 miles, about 500 feet, during that gap, with a listed speed of 0, as if the truck hadn't moved at all. The dashcam footage haunted me. I'd lost signal for a brief moment, and then picked up again slightly ahead, with no record of motion in between. It defied logic. Everything else about the drive seemed completely normal. No missing footage, no technical glitches. I rewatched the clips obsessively, hunting for any clue. In the moments before the gap, something strange caught my eye. Around 12:35, a tiny shimmer appeared in the upper right corner of the front camera. It wasn't on the road or hood, but up in the sky. About the size of my thumb on the screen, it wobbled in place, almost like a bug crawling across a dirty windshield, but suspended in the air. Over the next few minutes, this shimmer drifted slightly left. The stars behind it remained unchanged, yet seemed to blur when the shimmer passed, as if something semi-transparent moved between the camera and the night sky. This happened around 12:37, and the blackout occurred at 12:38. The rear camera revealed another oddity. At the same time, a single frame showed a faint, wide arc of light at the top center of the view. It wasn't from taillights or headlights, more like a soft, barely visible smudge that vanished instantly. I kept quiet about it for days, unsure how to explain what I'd seen. Eventually, I showed my neighbor Danny, who used to work for ADOT and watches plenty of strange sky footage. After viewing the recordings, he simply asked, "Did you feel anything when it happened?" No, I hadn't. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary during the drive. My audiobook played continuously. No radio static, no unusual sounds, no sense of lost time until I reviewed the dashcam. That's what troubled me most, the complete absence of any perceivable moment when something felt wrong. I'd driven this road countless times, seen dust storms and distant testing range flashes. This was different, completely different. I've been living up here almost my whole life, never had much reason to leave. My name's Aaron Klee, and I'm 62 now. I used to work radar maintenance for the Air Force out at Clear, the big radar station near Anderson, Alaska. I was stationed there off and on, from 95 to 2017, with my last 3 years in civilian support. People always ask the same questions when they see how I live now. Why do I lock my truck every time I park it, even in my own driveway? Why don't I go outside after dark unless absolutely necessary? It's not paranoia. I don't think something's gonna jump out of the woods and grab me. I just don't feel right out there anymore. Not since that last week at Clear. It was October 2017 when I gave my notice. My wife was already retired, and we wanted to move closer to Fairbanks to spend more time with the grandkids. I had 2 weeks left, mostly doing equipment checks and closing out service logs. The station sits in the middle of nowhere, just a huge radar dome, some support buildings, and endless tundra. It gets cold fast that time of year. Long nights, short days. The sun wasn't rising until after 9, and it was dark again by 5. I worked swing shift from 2 to 10 p.m. There were 3 of us on my crew, me, a guy named Marquez, and a new kid named Dwyer, who transferred up from Offutt. We handled maintenance on the transmitter systems and monitored diagnostics from the command building. Things started getting strange on a Tuesday. Marquez and I were in the power control room checking battery arrays. Around 7:30, everything flickered. Not just the lights, but the whole system. For half a second, every screen, every panel, even the fluorescence above us dimmed like there was a brownout. Then, everything came back online, like nothing happened. I tried to upload a clip to a forum I use for car tech stuff, but the file wouldn't load properly. When I compressed it, the last frame, the blackout one, turned into corrupted green static. Using a screen recorder, that frame came out solid black like it had been cut. The original still plays fine on my laptop. I saved it to a couple different drives just in case. Every now and then, I play it back frame by frame. There's nothing new to find. The stars blink out, then they come back. And I was just driving. The logs showed nothing unusual. No power dip, no backup system activation. I called the operations desk, and they confirmed everything was normal. I dismissed it as a minor software glitch. But then it happened again. A brief flicker, maybe a second long, and this time a radar diagnostic panel froze, requiring a manual reboot. Marquez and I both witnessed it. We exchanged a silent look and got back to work. That's how things go in this place. We logged both events meticulously, noting the lack of system alerts. The next night, Wednesday, I was doing a routine physical check by the east dish panel just after 9. Bundled in my parka, clipboard, and flashlight in hand, I was about 20 yards from the structure when something caught my eye in the snow. The tracks weren't fresh, just a light dusting that day, but the ice was soft enough to hold an impression. These weren't boot prints. They were long, narrow, with a curved shape like two elongated commas side by side. Leaning down, I realized the shape didn't match any animal I knew from this area, not moose, fox, or rabbit. The tracks were shallow, forming a precise, tight zigzag line, almost perfectly spaced. They led around the structure's corner, out of sight. Something stopped me from following. I completed the inspection and said nothing. Thursday brought another oddity. 2 exterior cameras went dark around 6:42 p.m., almost simultaneously. One faced the northeast field, the other mounted on an old, unused tower. Strangely, they didn't truly go offline. The feed continued, just black, as if functioning but seeing nothing. No static, no disconnect. Marquez and I tried remote resets. Nothing changed. We sent Dwyer out to investigate. He returned after 10 minutes, looking unsettled. Both cameras were pristine. No frost, no damage, no obstruction. He kept repeating how clean the lenses were, which struck me as odd. The last shift started like any other, but something felt off. I sat in my truck watching the sky, searching for something I couldn't name. Stars looked the same as always, but the air felt different, hollow, almost wrong. Inside the station, Dwyer was monitoring screens in the diagnostic room. When I walked in, he just nodded. I glanced at the monitors and noticed something strange. A faint, irregular white light pulsing in the field beyond the fence. It blinked twice, paused, then blinked again in an odd rhythm. I asked Dwyer how long it had been happening. "A few minutes," he said. We watched for 10 more minutes, but nothing else appeared. I checked all the systems. Everything was normal. No alerts, no surges, clean logs. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not from the screens, but from outside. Earlier in the week, something had been off. The equipment had gone quiet, completely silent. No wind, no hum, just dead stillness. My colleague had looked at something twice, seeming confused. He said he heard nothing out there. That night, I left early. Marquez never showed up, texting that he wasn't feeling well. I signed out and drove home. The next morning, I called my supervisor and quit. I officially retired soon after. I've never spoken to Marquez or Dwyer since. Someone mentioned Dwyer transferred out by spring. The blacked-out screens and that strange light remain a mystery I've never explained. I settled into a quiet life just outside North Pole after moving closer to my grandkids. Mornings became my routine, jogging through Noville's peaceful farmland before the world wakes up. Late October, around 5:15 a.m., I'd head out in my bright orange windbreaker, making sure I was visible, even though barely anyone drove these roads. This particular morning was crisp. The sky was transitioning from black to blue, with a half-full moon providing soft light. No headlamp needed. I loved these early hours, frogs chirping, crickets singing, early birds starting their day. The route along Bristow Road was familiar, quiet, with occasional pickup trucks heading to work being the only signs of life. Just past the Martin Place, with its old two-story building and rusted tractor, something caught my eye. The woods to my right, dense with tall pines and oaks, held something unusual. Lights, 5 or 6 of them, white and steady, positioned in an odd, tilted ring. They weren't blinking, and they weren't like any aircraft formation I'd seen before. I stopped running, trying to understand what I was seeing. No sound accompanied these lights. No helicopter blades, no engine noise, not even wind. They moved with an unnatural smoothness, rotating slowly like a suspended mobile, perfectly synchronized. Something was different. Something wasn't right. These days, I don't go out at night. When I do, I always look up first. The cameras that once monitored the area never came back online after that morning. They were replaced, but no explanation was ever found. I won't return to that area, even in daylight. Some things are better left unknown. I was running my usual route near the Martin Place, just outside of Prescott, Arizona. That night, the air had cooled down and everything seemed normal at first. But then something changed. I noticed lights in the trees. I'm not sure how long I stared, maybe a minute, maybe less. My body started cooling off and the sweat on my face stung in the breeze. Out of instinct, I turned around to check if anyone else was on the road. I wasn't scared yet, just unsettled. When I looked back, the lights were gone. Not fading or flying away, just completely vanished, like someone had flipped a switch. I stepped back, trying to reposition myself, thinking maybe they'd shifted behind the trees or I was standing at the wrong angle. Nothing. That's when I noticed the silence. Dead quiet. No insects, no birds, not even wind rustling the branches. I stood breathing, waiting for some sound. My footsteps on the gravel shoulder felt wrong. Usually, that stretch of road would be full of chirping, clicking, and rustling by that hour. I'd never heard it go completely still before. Fear crept in slowly, not panic, but a tight, uneasy feeling like something was watching me. I looked back toward the trees, trying to make out any movement, but everything remained still. I started jogging again, just a little faster than normal. My footsteps sounded incredibly loud on the asphalt. The silence followed me for about a quarter mile. I kept glancing up, expecting to see the lights again, but the sky was brightening and there was nothing. At the B and near the cattle gate, birds suddenly began to chirp. First just a few, then more, like someone had unpaused the woods. I slowed down and looked behind me. Still nothing. I finished the loop like always. When I got home, my husband Nick was still asleep. I sat on the porch with some water and didn't say a word. I didn't tell him for a couple of days. I guess I just wanted to convince myself it was something normal. The next few mornings, I ran the same route at the same time. Nothing strange happened, but every time I passed that stretch near the Martin Place, I'd slow down and look at the trees. I never saw the lights again, but twice, just twice, I noticed the same thing. No sound, no birds, no bugs. Just for a moment, like everything had stopped holding its breath. We'd been talking about stargazing for a while, and that night, everything came together perfectly. The sky was a dark canvas of stars, no moon in sight, with every constellation crisp and sharp. Around 9 p.m., me, Nate, Jen, and Carlos drove out to the lake, just a short 20-minute trip from town. The parking lot was nearly empty when we arrived. We grabbed some blankets, lawn chairs, and a couple of beers, then headed down to the water's edge. The lake was like a natural mirror, completely still. At first, we just lay back, pointing out familiar constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, making casual conversation while crickets chirped and water lapped softly against the rocks. Jen, who always seems to be staring at the water, suddenly nudged me. "Hey, look at that," she said, pointing to a soft, steady light reflecting on the lake's surface. It wasn't from any flashlight we'd brought, just a gentle, pale blue glow flickering near the lake's center. I scanned the sky, searching for its source, but found nothing. No airplanes, no drones, no boats. Carlos suggested it might be a fishing boat, but we all saw the opposite shore was completely empty. No lights, no movement. The water remained flat and undisturbed. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a reflection from the closed campground across the lake, but nothing made sense. We sat quietly, our eyes darting between water and sky. The light remained steady, hanging motionless like something solid beneath the surface. Nate tried zooming in with his phone, but the light was too far and fuzzy. When he put the phone down, the reflection was still there. Then something strange happened. Jen pointed out that the light had shifted, not smoothly, but in a jerky, unexpected way. It seemed to jump a few feet to the right, then back again. The water was perfectly still, with only the tiniest ripples breaking its surface. We were hiking the river trail in Olympic National Park, about 10 miles into our journey. I was with my friend Leo, who visits from Colorado once or twice a year. We've known each other since college, and this weekend we were tackling the trail that winds through dense rainforest before climbing into alpine terrain near Glacier Meadows. As we walked, something caught our attention near the shore. A light blinked in the water, drawing our focus. It flickered briefly, then suddenly brightened to almost twice its original intensity before dimming again. An uneasy silence fell over us. A strange tension hung in the air, as if we were anticipating something unknown. Without warning, the light vanished completely. No gradual fade, no warning, just gone. We looked up, scanning the sky, but everything appeared normal. Not a single star had shifted or disappeared. "Did it just vanish?" Carlos asked quietly. I mumbled in agreement, though truthfully, I was bewildered. We remained by the lake for another hour, watching and waiting, but the mysterious light never reappeared. The night remained calm and seemingly ordinary. During our drive home, we attempted to discuss the incident casually, but none of us truly believed our own nonchalance. The next day, I dove into research. I scoured online forums for Prescott, checked local weather reports, and looked for any notices about the lake or nearby military activities. Nothing emerged. No strange light reports, no warnings. Jen mentioned her park ranger friend had once talked about will-o'-the-wisp folklore, old tales of marsh lights, but neither of us put much stock in such stories. What troubled me most was the light's location. It remained exclusively in the water. Had it been flying or floating above, we would have spotted it in the sky. Instead, we saw only a reflection with no discernible source. It felt like something lurked just beneath the surface, deliberately avoiding direct observation. I keep replaying that night, trying to make sense of our experience. While we might have imagined it, 4 people can't hallucinate the exact same phenomenon. I still visit Silver Lake occasionally, hoping to witness the event again, but the water has remained quiet. No strange lights, no mysterious reflections. Yet on certain nights, when the air is perfectly still and stars dot the sky, I find myself staring at the water, half expecting that pale blue glow to flicker just beneath the surface. Blue Glacier was our destination, a simple overnight trip in late May. The trail was mostly empty, with just a few hikers on the lower section before the waterfall. Low, misty clouds hung overhead, but the weather stayed dry. Around mile 9 or 10, we stopped on a flat rock overlooking a mossy ravine with a small stream. The surroundings were peaceful, no wind, just the sound of water and birds. We were eating snacks when Leo suddenly asked about a drone. I followed his gaze and saw something strange. A smooth, silver dot hovering just above the treetops, perfectly still. It wasn't like any drone I'd seen before. No movement, no sound, not even a hint of a propeller. Something felt off about it, though I couldn't explain exactly what. We watched it for about 10 seconds. Then, without warning, it shot backward through the mist. The movement was impossible. No turn, no gradual arc, just an instant, straight-line retreat. It stopped briefly, then rose straight up into the clouds and vanished. We stood in stunned silence. Leo's laugh was nervous, uncertain. "You saw that, right?" he asked. I nodded. We tried to rationalize what we'd witnessed, maybe a drone caught in a wind current or some optical illusion. But there was no wind, and its movement defied any logic of mechanical flight. The rest of the hike was quiet. We reached Elk Lake, more of a wide pond surrounded by trees and snow patches, and set up camp. It was completely deserted. As I hung the bear bag, I couldn't shake the feeling of that strange object in the sky. We didn't talk much about it, but we both knew something extraordinary had happened. Something that didn't fit any explanation we could imagine. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no wind, nothing stirred. Even the water lay perfectly still. Leo noticed it too, making a joke about feeling watched. I didn't laugh, but I felt the same way. That night, sleep eluded me. The temperature hovered in the upper 30s, and we were in decent sleeping bags. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I found myself wide awake for no apparent reason. A faint glow filtered through the tent's nylon. Thinking it might be moonlight, I checked my watch. 3:17 a.m., far from the expected moon. Carefully, I unzipped the tent and peeked out. There, floating about 20 feet off the ground behind the trees, was a soft, bluish-white light. No sounds accompanied it, no footsteps, no voices, just stillness. I zipped the tent closed and lay back down, watching the light until it vanished. Morning brought no answers. The sky remained overcast, the ground dry, and our bear bag untouched. Leo seemed different. "Did you hear anything last night?" he asked. I mentioned the light. He simply nodded and said, "Yeah." When pressed, he revealed he'd awakened around 3 a.m. with an intense feeling of someone standing near the tent. Something inexplicably warned him against calling out. We packed up quickly, eager to leave. The hike down was swift and quiet. We briefly passed a couple on the trail but didn't stop to chat. Near the trailhead, Leo pointed out something strange, a perfect oval-shaped bark scar on a large tree. The exposed wood beneath was unnaturally smooth. He tried photographing it, but the image came out black. Checking my watch before leaving, it read 11:48. But when we passed the ranger station, the car clock showed 12:09. A small detail, perhaps, but something felt off. The weekend started as a simple escape from Lincoln's city noise. I'd driven out looking for solitude, finding a quiet spot near an old decommissioned missile silo. Just concrete bunkers, rusted fences, and an unsettling silence marked the landscape. My RV settled into a clearing, satellite dish up, ready for a peaceful few days of reading and maybe hiking. That first evening was calm. A clear sky, a light breeze with a hint of chill. I checked my watch around 10 p.m. before turning in, expecting nothing unusual. But just before 3 a.m., something changed. A deep, low hum began vibrating through the camper. Not loud, but persistent. It felt physical, like the ground itself was resonating. I sat up, trying to identify the source. No distant machinery, no truck engines, no headlights, just this constant humming. Then the electronics started acting strange. My phone screen flickered, resetting to midnight for a second before returning to the correct time. The camper lights dimmed momentarily. The radio crackled with static, went silent, then resumed normal operation. Everything electronic glitched simultaneously: phone, radio, digital microwave clock, for just a couple of seconds. I assumed it was a power surge or some random interference. The old missile silo seemed to hum faintly beneath the ground, almost alive. Sleep became difficult. I kept waking up, always around 3 a.m. When I finally got home and checked my camera, the photos confused me further. One dinner shot was mysteriously time-stamped at 4:26 a.m., despite being taken in daylight. My watch, which I'd synced with my phone just the day before, showed something was off. We haven't discussed what happened that night. Honestly, I'm not sure what we saw, or if we saw anything at all. For 3 nights in a row, something strange happened around the abandoned missile silo near my RV. It always started the same way: a low, almost imperceptible hum that would build slowly, then suddenly stop right at 3 a.m. Each time, my electronics would blink out for a split second. The third night was different. I was outside with a flashlight, the cold air thick with low gray clouds that completely obscured the stars. Around 2:55 a.m., I felt a vibration beneath my feet. Not quite a sound, more like a frequency you could sense. The missile silo stood as a dark silhouette against the cloudy sky, but now a soft, pulsing orange glow rimmed its top edge. When 3 a.m. hit, everything went crazy. The hum peaked and then vanished. My phone shut down and rebooted. The radio crackled and died. Even the small LED lights on my RV's control panel flickered. For a moment, total silence hung in the air. Then the glow above the silo disappeared, and the clouds seemed to part briefly. The next morning revealed more oddities. My phone's battery had mysteriously drained by 20% overnight. The radio emitted a persistent, weak buzz, and just like the previous mornings, a new blank file appeared on my laptop, time-stamped exactly at 3:01 a.m. I'd asked around town and on local forums, but no one else reported hearing the hum or experiencing similar electronic glitches. The silo had been abandoned since the 1980s, with no nearby radio towers, power plants, or factories to explain the phenomenon. Throughout the day, an unsettling feeling persisted, as if something was watching me from the silo or the surrounding trees. These blank files kept appearing each night, deleted each morning, only to return again. Something was definitely not right. The hum started again, this time louder and more intense. The air vibrated with it, and I felt a slight pressure in my ears. It was chilly, and the clouds had cleared, revealing a starless black sky. On the fifth night, I left the camper door unlocked and went outside just before 3. The orange glow appeared again around the silo's edge, pulsing softly. At exactly 3 a.m., my watch and phone both stopped for a full 10 seconds. The radio died completely. No static, no sound. The control panel lights went dark. Then everything flickered back on and the glow vanished. I stayed outside another half hour, but nothing else happened. The next morning, my electronics seemed fine for the first time. No strange files, no dead battery, no buzzing radio. I packed up and left before dark. Driving away, I looked back at the silo fading into the distance and wondered if whatever was causing all that was tied to the place or just some odd natural phenomenon. It started weeks earlier. On the fourth night, I decided to record audio with my phone. I left it on the table and tried to stay awake until after 3. The hum started again, and when it hit its peak, I heard something else beneath the vibration. A faint clicking noise, like a slow mechanical heartbeat or a signal. It was steady, rhythmic, and didn't match anything natural. After that, I looked out the window and caught a glimpse of something moving near the edge of the silo, just a shadow shifting in the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone. I thought about packing up and leaving, but I was curious. What could explain any of this? I'd read about old military sites having strange electromagnetic fields, but nothing matched what I was experiencing. I never found an explanation that fit, and no one else I talked to had heard or seen anything similar. Sometimes late at night, I still hear a faint hum in the back of my mind. Not loud, but enough to make me look around, wondering if it's back or if I just imagined the whole thing. Sometimes the experience would carry strange smells, metallic, almost like ozone or burnt wire. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to share something like this, but here I am. It started with my son Dylan when he was 7, living in this tiny farming town in central Nebraska. Real quiet place, mostly cornfields and old dirt roads. Not much to do except look out over the fields and watch the seasons change. We've lived here for a while. Dylan burst into the kitchen one early October afternoon, waving a crayon drawing that immediately caught my attention. At first glance, it looked like a typical kid's messy artwork, but something felt different. The picture depicted a tall, thin figure standing outside a window, gray and shadowy, with impossibly long arms stretching almost beyond the page's edges. Its head was oversized and oval, with dark blotches where eyes should be, and the window itself had jagged lines suggesting broken glass. When I asked about the drawing, Dylan's response sent a chill down my spine. "That's the tall gray thing with long arms. It was outside our window last night," he said matter-of-factly. Rachel dismissed it as childhood imagination, laughing it off and suggesting too much TV or playground stories were to blame. But Dylan wasn't the type to fabricate scary tales or draw disturbing images. I pressed him for details, and he pointed directly to the bedroom window, overlooking our backyard. Beyond our fenced yard lay an open cornfield, dark and quiet. "You sure this wasn't a dream?" I asked. Dylan looked me straight in the eyes. "No, Dad, I saw it for real. It was just standing there watching." That night, while tucking him in, I watched the moonlit yard carefully. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. Maybe it was a tree shadow or a passing animal, I told myself. Days later, our neighbor Mark shared something that made my blood run cold. His security camera had captured footage at 2 a.m., showing a tall, dark silhouette near the fence between our properties. Completely motionless and distinctly not human, the figure stood with unnaturally long arms hanging low, seemingly watching our house. When I suggested it might be a tree or wind-blown object, Mark was adamant. The shape was too precise, too deliberate. He sent me the footage, and suddenly, Dylan's drawing didn't seem like mere childish imagination anymore. The infrared camera captured a grainy black and white image that sent chills down our spines. Near the back fence, a figure stood motionless for about 2 minutes. Its shape was difficult to discern, tall and unnaturally narrow, with arms that seemed impossibly long. No distinct facial features were visible, just a dark, indistinct blur that suddenly vanished as if it had never existed. Rachel, typically talkative, remained silent after seeing the footage. We all found it unsettling, but hesitated to jump to wild conclusions. Dylan began drawing the mysterious figure repeatedly. Every few days, he'd bring home a new version of the tall gray entity. Sometimes the arms would stretch even longer, or the figure would appear in different locations around the house. One particularly disturbing drawing showed it standing just outside the front door. I started watching the backyard more closely at night. Shadows seemed to move beyond the fence line. Nothing concrete, just fleeting movements that didn't match the natural landscape. Some nights, I could have sworn I heard scratching near the fence, but each time I investigated, nothing was there. We kept this to ourselves. I knew how crazy it would sound to others. My parents dismissed my concerns, suggesting it was probably just a raccoon or a stray dog. Maybe they were right, but the drawings and camera footage defied simple explanation. About a week after Mark's video, I was outside smoking a cigarette just before midnight. The night was cold and still. At the far end of the yard, near the cornfield beyond the fence, I saw the tall gray figure again. Motionless, it seemed to be watching the house. I froze. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Dylan began having recurring nightmares about the gray figure entering the house, always just standing, watching him while he slept. Those nights were restless for me. Gradually, the drawings stopped. Dylan claimed he hadn't seen the figure recently, and the strange nighttime noises had ceased. Mark's camera remained our only tangible evidence of something inexplicable. The night was calm and crisp in Flagstaff, Arizona. Around 10:30 p.m. in early spring, I was out on the back porch with my camera, set up on a tripod and aimed at the moon. The sky hung clear, with just a thin haze softening the moon's edges. As a longtime photography enthusiast focused on landscapes and night skies, I was adjusting settings to capture the lunar surface's craters and shadows. The neighborhood was silent, save for occasional distant dog barks and far-off car sounds. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. While looking through the viewfinder, something caught my attention, a small dark shape moving impossibly fast across the moon's surface. Its movement was unnaturally straight and mechanical, slicing across the frame with precision. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were deceiving me, or if a lens smudge was responsible. With my naked eye, the sky appeared completely normal, but through the camera lens, this shape was undeniably present, a solid, dark object traversing the lunar landscape in a single, unbroken line. I snapped several shots, hoping to capture the phenomenon again, but it appeared only in that single frame. Feeling slightly unsettled, I packed up my equipment and went inside, convincing myself it was likely just a camera artifact. The next day, examining the photos on my computer, the object was clear and unmistakable. Sharp-edged and distinct, it moved from left to right with no blur. I showed my wife, and we discussed the strange image. Weeks passed, and the memory lingered. Sometimes in the backyard after dark, an eerie sensation would wash over me, like something was watching from the shadows. Faint scratching sounds near the fence or subtle rustlings in the cornfields would catch my attention. But whenever I turned to look, nothing was there. Dylan never mentioned the incident again after that month. Life returned to normal, but the drawings and footage remained on my phone, a constant reminder that something unexplained might be lurking just beyond our perception, watching from the darkness. I'd been trying to figure out what was in that strange photo for days, but no one seemed to take it seriously. Marissa brushed it off as a camera glitch, and my neighbor Pete, who's usually awake late at night, saw nothing unusual. For a week, I spent my evenings on the porch, camera ready, scanning the sky. Nights passed with only familiar lunar landscapes, nothing out of the ordinary. Then, close to midnight on a partly cloudy evening, things got weird. I was sipping coffee when the streetlights started acting strange. They flickered randomly, one dimming briefly, while others remained steady. After about 5 minutes, the flickering stopped. Looking toward the hills, I saw something that didn't make sense. A faint, bluish glow pulsed just beyond the ridge. It wasn't moving like any aircraft and wasn't bright enough to be a spotlight. I tried to capture it with my camera, but by the time I focused, the light had vanished. When I told Marissa the next morning, she suggested it might be a car reflection or a drone, but she hadn't seen anything herself. More puzzling was that none of our neighbors reported seeing the light or the street lamp disturbance. A few nights later, my phone died suddenly with a low buzz, despite being fully charged just an hour before. It refused to turn on for almost 20 minutes. Later that night, I went outside and heard a soft, constant humming, like distant machinery, but with no identifiable source. I walked around, searching, but found nothing. Just quiet streets and houses. The whole experience left me unsettled, wondering what might be happening just beyond what we can easily explain. I'd been tracking something strange for days. It started with a tiny scratch on my camera's lens cover, one I was certain wasn't there before. Little oddities began piling up, the microwave clock blinking off, my car radio catching weird static bursts, and my laptop randomly slowing down with no clear cause. About 10 days later, everything crystallized during a moonlit night on my porch. The moon was half full, bright and sharp. Through my camera, I spotted a dark, thin object crossing its surface, moving fast and straight. This wasn't the first time, but now it seemed closer, more defined. I called Marissa out to see, but she saw nothing. Pete just laughed when I mentioned it, suggesting I needed new glasses. Still, I kept photographing. That night, the object cross-mossed my frame 3 times, always at the same speed and angle. The next evening, I set up a time-lapse, hoping to capture more evidence. But when I reviewed the footage, everything looked completely normal. November, moon moved across the sky, just as it should, with no strange shapes or shadows. We'd been out in the desert that Saturday night, Laura and I, just seeking some quiet and a clear starry view. Amateur astronomers, we were. Nothing serious. Just 2 people with folding chairs, blankets, and Laura's small binoculars. We'd driven to a dirt pull-off near Tonopah, Nevada, far enough from town lights to see the Milky Way spread like a pale smear overhead. No one else ever saw what I saw. The humming, the lights, the object crossing the moon, it all remained my secret. I kept looking for answers, but the more I tried to explain it, the less sense it made. Eventually, I stopped taking nighttime photos. Sometimes I still scroll through those old images, wondering if it was just a trick of light or some camera glitch. But deep down, I know what I saw, and I can't explain why that object was crossing the moon or why I was the only one who witnessed it. The desert night was freezing, with stars scattered like tiny lights in a shaken jar. Not a single cloud disrupted the sky. We'd set up camp by a rocky ridge that offered an unobstructed view, perfect for stargazing. Laura and I were quietly pointing out constellations when she suddenly went still, her binoculars aimed upward. I followed her gaze and saw it, a tight cluster of 6 or 7 lights. Unlike stars, these were steady like LEDs, hanging motionless in the sky. When I asked her thoughts, she just handed me the binoculars. Looking through them, the lights were even more distinct, grouped in an unfamiliar shape with no blinking, no sound, just an odd, perfectly still formation. For about 10 minutes, we watched in silence. Then something changed. One light detached from the cluster, moving slowly in a wide, smooth arc. The movement was deliberate, tracing a circle at least a quarter-mile wide. Its soft, constant glow never wavered. After completing its loop, the light rejoined the cluster with precision, like formation flying birds, but without any of the typical organic movement. No wings, no fluttering, just an impossible mechanical grace. I told Laura this wasn't normal. She nodded, her eyes wide with the same unspoken understanding. We watched, breathless, as the cluster gradually drifted upward, fading into the night. No sudden movement, just a slow climb until it vanished. The entire encounter lasted maybe 20 minutes. Afterward, the sky returned to normal, stars twinkling as if nothing extraordinary had happened. We packed up and drove back, an unspoken tension hanging between us. The road was dark and oppressively quiet. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights, but there was nothing, just endless darkness behind us. I was driving home from my usual night shift at the hospital in Spokane. the roads mostly empty as the clock neared 2 a.m. The early spring night was clear and cold, with that sharp air that still held a hint of daytime warmth. My car windows were cracked open just enough to prevent stuffiness, and the radio hummed softly in the background. About 20 minutes into the drive, past the last stretch of streetlights where the highway opened into empty fields, I saw something strange. A light in the sky was moving downward, but not like a typical falling star. This wasn't a rushing, streaking meteor. Instead, it descended slowly, almost floating, suspended in midair a few hundred feet above the ground. I blinked repeatedly, wondering if city lights were playing tricks on my eyes. But the light remained, completely silent. No buzz, no crackle, nothing you'd expect from something moving through the atmosphere. It was an eerie, dead silence. I slowed the car, watching intently. The light wasn't harsh like a spotlight, but a soft, yellowish glow. The next morning, curiosity drove me to call the local ranger station. I wanted to know if anyone else had reported anything unusual. The guy who answered laughed it off, saying campers often claim to see strange things, but there were no official reports. My online research turned up only vague mentions of weird lights in nearby counties, nothing like what I'd witnessed. What struck me most was how utterly normal everything else had been that night. No strange noises, no phone interference, no unsettling feelings of being watched. Just those inexplicable lights moving in a way I'd never seen before, then vanishing. I can't definitively say what I saw. It wasn't a plane or drone, too high and too steady, with an odd movement as one light separated and then rejoined the group. It definitely wasn't a meteor or satellite, which move quickly and don't stop or loop around. Every time I replay the memory, I'm left with the same haunting question. What were those lights doing out there in the silent desert sky? My drive home that night was like any other until I saw something that didn't make sense. A light appeared in the sky, not blinking or dancing around, just hanging there. Too far to make out its shape, it was just a bright blur. Then, without warning, it shot straight up into the darkness above the trees, faster than anything I'd ever seen. No sound, no explanation. My heart was racing, but not from fear. It was more a mix of confusion and a strange tension. I scanned the rearview mirror, half hoping someone else had witnessed this, but the road behind me was empty and dark. When I got home, I told Sarah about it. She brushed it off, suggesting it was probably a satellite or drone. But I knew what I saw. Drones don't move like that, not at that height, not that silently. For the next few nights, I found myself watching the sky while driving, searching for something similar. Nothing, just normal stars and sparse traffic. But something had changed. Strange things started happening. My phone began glitching, calls dropping, screen flickering randomly. The clock radio reset itself repeatedly, always around 2 a.m. Even the apartment lights would dim briefly, though the main power never failed. I tried to ignore it, but the memory of that light kept nagging at me. There was no logical explanation. No nearby planes, no satellites on any tracking app. Just that slow descent, the hover, then the sudden climb. I wondered if I was just tired, imagining things after a long shift. But the moment was burned into my memory. Now, when I'm alone at night, I catch myself looking up, scanning the sky, half expecting to see it again. But it hasn't returned. I can't explain what I saw. A light trick, an atmospheric anomaly, or something entirely unknown. All I know is that on that night, I witnessed something that moved with purpose, in complete silence. Something that defied everything I understood about movement in the sky. It stopped long enough for me to see it, and I'll never forget that moment. My old Zenith radio had been a faithful companion for years, a wooden-framed relic from a garage sale that carried the faint whisper of cigarette smoke. After retiring from my engineering firm, I'd kept radio tinkering as a hobby, something to keep my hands and mind busy. It started one night around 11:47 p.m. I always checked the clock at that time, a habit ingrained over decades. The local AM station was playing softly, its static a familiar background noise. Then, suddenly, 3 precise tones cut through. Beep, beep, beep. Just as quickly, silence returned. At first, I dismissed it as interference or a transmitter glitch, but something nagged at me, so I wrote down the details in my notebook. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same 3 tones. Coincidence, I thought, But as nights passed, the pattern remained unchanged. I began logging everything meticulously: date, time, weather conditions, anything, that might offer a clue. But nothing varied. No voices, no additional sounds, just those three consistent tones. What made it truly bizarre was its precision. The radio had to be on a specific frequency, and the time had to be exactly 11:47 p.m. If I fell asleep early or late or changed the station, nothing happened. Determined to understand, I called the local AM station. The technician laughed it off as interference or a prank. Skeptical, I tested other radios, my old transistor, a digital set, even a shortwave receiver. None captured the tones like my Zenith. With other radios, there was only static. Months went by, and my family started giving me strange looks. I was waking up nightly to document these mysterious beeps. Something was happening, and I was going to figure it out. The radio had become more than just a device. It was a puzzle I couldn't let go. Every night at 11:47, three precise tones would cut through the silence, drawing me in with an inexplicable urgency. I'd wait, hoping for something more. A change, a repeat, anything. But only silence followed. Then, barely audible, a whisper would emerge. Not quite static, more like a distant wind tunneling through empty space. I'd strain to hear, but it always remained just beyond comprehension. The old Zenith radio, a 1953 model with its vintage tubes and dials, seemed almost purposefully tuned to this mysterious frequency. Recording became my obsession. I'd capture the tones on an old cassette recorder, their quality pure and steady. Yet the whispered undertone never translated to tape, as if it existed only in that live moment. I tried mapping the signal, searching for a pattern or direction, but found nothing concrete. My neighborhood was quiet, nestled on the town's outskirts. No nearby transmitters except local AM and distant police radio towers. One clear, still evening, the tones arrived precisely at 11:47. Simultaneously, a soft blue-green light flickered miles away, hovering, steady, then vanishing without a trace. No aircraft, no street lamp could explain it. The static would sometimes shift during transmissions. Faint patterns would tease, almost like Morse code, but never resolving into anything definitive. My wife suggested moving the radio, but I refused. This Zenith felt different, connected to something larger. A persistent sensation lingered. Something was waiting, watching, wanting me to understand. It wasn't fear, exactly, more an unsettling awareness, an itch just beneath my skin. Something was communicating, just beyond my comprehension. I kept the radio tuned to that frequency, waiting each night for the three tones at 11:47 p.m. Sometimes I wondered if I was imagining things or losing my mind. But the watch by my bedside confirmed the time was near. My notes were scattered on the floor near the radio when I woke up early one morning. I didn't recall knocking them over, but maybe I had sleepwalked. As I gathered them, I noticed something odd. The log times for the tones weren't always exactly 11:47 anymore. Some nights showed 11:46 or 11:48. I'd been certain I was careful, but the notes told a different story. This made me question everything. Was I misremembering the exact time? Could my internal clock be off? I checked the radio again. It remained tuned to the same frequency, with tones coming through sharp and clear, as always. That same night, the faint whisper returned after the tones, more distinct this time. It seemed like a voice attempting to form words, but failing. A broken murmur I could almost understand, yet never quite grasp. I chose not to record it, thinking that might make it disappear like before. Over the following weeks, the strange presence grew more pronounced. Sometimes when the tones played, I'd sense being watched from a distant place, as if unseen eyes tracked me through the static. One night, I left the radio on all day, anticipating 11:47, but the tones never came. The next night, I found the radio had switched stations on its own, static filling the speaker. When I reset it, the tones returned the following evening. I began to wonder if the radio was acting like a receiver, catching signals from somewhere beyond my reach, or perhaps somewhere was reaching out to me. There was no logic, no discernible patterns, no clear answers. I've tried sharing this with friends, but they just laugh or change the subject. Even my son thinks I'm wasting my time. Yet I persist, waiting each night. It was just after dusk when I was driving home from a weekend trip, heading past the old Air Force Base outside Valley Ridge. These days, it's mostly inactive, with only a few planes and occasional night exercises. The road runs alongside the runway, and I often slow down to watch the jets. It's a peculiar habit I've developed. Something about watching them roar into the sky feels soothing after a long day. That night was cool and clear, without a single cloud overhead. The runway lights cut through the darkness as I drove my truck, windows down, the engine humming steadily. A fighter jet rolled into view just past the main hangar, preparing for takeoff. I pulled over near the chain link fence to watch. The jet's afterburners erupted, and it shot down the runway, lifting off smoothly. But something was different this time. Normally, it would climb quickly and bank sharply before vanishing into the night. Instead, at about 500 feet up, it simply stopped, completely motionless. Engine screaming, yet suspended in midair like an invisible hand had frozen it. I blinked hard, wondering if exhaustion or strange lighting was playing tricks on me. The sky was clear, and the jet hung perfectly still against the deepening blue. No wobble, no drift, just suspended. After what felt like an eternity, maybe 5 seconds, it rocketed upward. Not a normal climb, but an impossible ascent nearly straight up, defying every law of physics. The engine's roar transformed into a high-pitched whistle as the jet vanished above the clouds. No pilot I knew could execute such a maneuver without the plane disintegrating. Yet this jet looked completely intact, moving with an unnatural smoothness, as if guided by an unseen force. Heart racing, I remained parked, staring at the spot where the jet had disappeared, waiting, wondering. Nothing happened. Back on the road, my mind reeled from what I'd witnessed. Miles later, a strange detail caught my attention in the side mirror. 2 bright lights hovered just above the treetops, tracking my movements. These weren't ordinary headlights. They were round, steady, emitting a soft, almost ethereal glow. I tested their behavior, slowing to 35 miles per hour. The lights matched my speed precisely. When I tried to get a better look over my shoulder, the trees obscured my view. Accelerating to 50 miles per hour, I watched in the mirror. The lights continued their silent pursuit, unwavering. A part of me wanted to pull over, to understand what was happening. But something held me back, driving forward into the unknown night. I was out hiking late one night, taking advantage of the cool air after a long, hot week. The trail winds through dense woods just outside of Millersville, a small town that's surrounded by enough forest to make you forget you're not deep in the mountains. I'd left my car at the trailhead around 9:30 p.m., planning to do a loop that usually took me about 2 hours. It was a clear night, not a cloud in the sky, with a sliver of a crescent moon hanging low over the trees. The temperature was just cool enough to keep the bugs off, but not so cold that I needed a jacket. I'd been hiking this trail for years, so I knew the terrain well and felt comfortable moving at a steady pace with my headlamp. About 45 minutes in, I slowed down near a clear ring where the trail widened. I remember thinking it was odd how quiet it was. The usual chorus of night insects was barely there, almost like the woods had gone on mute. That's when I saw the deer. It was standing maybe 20 yards ahead, right on the edge of the clearing. The thing that caught me was how still it was. Not just standing still, but completely frozen like a statue carved from wood. Its head was tilted upward, eyes fixed on something just above the treetops. I froze too and tried to figure out what it was looking at. I scanned the dark canopy with my headlamp off, not wanting to spook the deer or ruin my night vision. Then, out of nowhere, the lights blinked out, just vanished like a switch had been flipped. I wanted to get home. I checked all around. Nothing. When I got to my driveway, I sat in the truck for a while, trying to process everything. The jet, the hovering lights, the impossible climb. I felt weird, like I'd walked into something I wasn't meant to see. Over the next few days, I found myself driving that route again, hoping to catch a glimpse of the jet or those lights, but nothing happened. The base seemed quieter than usual. I talked to a couple of coworkers who've spent time near that airstrip, but no one mentioned anything unusual that night. Flight logs are off limits, and no news reports talked about any strange incidents. I keep wondering about that moment the jet just stopped midair. What held it up in those lights? Were they connected? Were they watching? I don't know, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. But that night, something was different near that base. Something I can't explain. The woods were silent when I first noticed something unusual. At first, nothing seemed out of place, just branches softly moving in the breeze. Then I saw it, a strange shape hovering above the treetops, maybe 40 or 50 feet high. This wasn't like any shadow I'd ever seen. It was smooth and barely outlined against the night sky, not moving like something falling or swaying. A faint, wet streetlight-like shimmer made it just visible enough to distinguish from a bird or familiar object. I considered it might be a weather balloon or drone, but there were no blinking lights or mechanical sounds. The deer beside me remained completely still, staring upward. Everything around us was motionless. No rustling in the trees, no other animal sounds. My heart started racing, but curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the deer exploded into motion, crashing through the underbrush and vanishing into the shadows. Its abrupt movement felt like releasing built-up tension in the air. The shape above remained perfectly still for a few more seconds before slowly rising higher and drifting away behind the ridge. After it disappeared, I stood watching the spot where it had been. The silence felt different now, heavier, as if the woods were observing me. When I finally started hiking again, everything seemed altered. The trees looked darker, shadows deeper, with something potentially lurking just out of sight. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the shape to reappear. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking slightly. Nothing overtly threatening had happened, but the experience felt wrong, like I'd accidentally witnessed something not meant for me. Driving home, I couldn't stop replaying the scene. The forest looked normal, but the memory of that hovering shape and the deer's strange reaction kept cycling through my mind. The night the power cut out was oddly calm. No wind, no storm, just sudden darkness around 11:45 p.m. I live in a small place outside Magdalena, New Mexico, tucked away on a dirt road most people would miss. My trailer sits on land owned by Warren, who lives in the main house down the hill. Empty sky and pinyon trees surround us. When everything went dark, I bed my phone, and checked the breaker panel outside. Everything looked normal. The silence was different, deeper than usual power outages. No fridge hum, no electronic buzz, no crickets, no distant dogs barking, just pure, heavy quiet. Before heading back to my trailer, I noticed a strange sound, low and steady, almost more felt than heard. It seemed to hover in the sky, making the hair on my arms stand up. I couldn't pinpoint its source, but it felt like pressure hanging in the air. When I reached the ridge near my trailer, I saw a light in the sky. Not a typical beam or flying object, just a single bright point hanging motionless. It looked like a stationary plane, but something was different. Completely still, not blinking. Later, I asked friends who had hiked that trail. No one reported anything unusual. No missing time, no strange sounds. Just me and the memory of that quiet, glowing shape above the trees, with a deer staring through the night. I was outside when I first noticed something strange. The night sky was clear, stars everywhere, but something caught my eye. A light appeared for a brief moment, then vanished when I looked back. I assumed it was just a plane or my imagination playing tricks, so I didn't think much of it. Back inside, I tried checking the electric co-op's outage map, but there was no signal, dead silence. Then the car alarms started. At first, it was just a distant honking from town. One alarm would go off, then pause, then another. The pattern was odd. Each alarm seemed to move down the street, triggered in sequence. Magdalena is a small town, with Main Street spanning just 3 blocks. Most cars would be parked along that stretch. The alarms continued for about 5 minutes, always one at a time, always in order. Then suddenly, complete silence. No crickets, no frogs, not even wind through the brush. Just a low, persistent hum vibrating in the background. I stepped onto the porch, phone light off, listening intently. That's when I saw something bizarre happening at the tree line. It wasn't a flash or lightning. The trees themselves remained still, but the light around them flickered weirdly, like a glitching video where brightness jumps without anything else moving. The humming grew louder. I walked toward the clearing where my truck was parked. The air felt strange, not hot exactly, but pressurized. I had an uncanny sensation of being watched, not in a paranoid way, but like someone was definitely standing behind me. I tried starting the truck. Nothing happened. No lights, no clicks. My phone still worked, but the flashlight was acting up, dimming and pulsing as if the battery was dying, even though it showed 33% charge. Something was definitely not right. I sat in my truck, the engine quiet, staring down the hill at Warren's house. Soft glows blinked behind the trees, like someone carrying a hidden light. They'd flash every few seconds, 10 yards apart, but never broke through the tree line. Time seemed to stretch, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. The sky felt heavy, not just dark, but with a strange, low, overcast quality. Even without clouds, darkness seemed to have substance. Slowly, the humming faded, like someone gently turning down a volume dial. Suddenly, the world came back to life. Insects chirped, distant frogs croaked, and a coyote barked somewhere beyond the draw. Warren's porch light flickered on. My fridge hummed to life, and the fan started spinning. Power had returned. The truck started normally, and I spent the rest of the night on the porch, coffee thermos in hand, rifle across my lap. Not out of fear, but simply to have something to do. The next morning, I went into town for gas and groceries. At the pump, I overheard Luis, who runs the local auto repair shop, talking about the strange power outage. He mentioned something bizarre. All the car alarms on Mall, in street, had gone off sequentially. The sheriff had driven through afterward and found nothing unusual. No break-ins, no wind, nothing. When I asked about the humming, Luis gave me a long look and simply said, "Yeah, like a transformer, but from everywhere." No further explanation followed. No investigations were launched. The electric co-op dismissed it as a substation trip, despite their logs showing no faults that night. The mysterious lights never reappeared. But about a week later, I noticed something odd on the ridge behind my trailer. One of the pinyon trees had a long, smooth, blackened streak running from top to base. No burn smell, no ash, just this shiny mark. The tree hasn't grown needles since. Last September, my buddy Eric and I were hiking near the old Clearview Fire Tower. We'd planned a 2-day trip through the hills east of Spokane. Nothing out of the ordinary, just familiar trails and camping near the tower. We started early morning on a crisp, clear fall day. The sky was a deep blue, with air that felt clean but not cold. Our light packs and good energy carried us along the trail by 7 a.m. We had GPS units and handheld radios, mostly because cell service in this area can be spotty. The hike was smooth and uneventful. We joked about how high-tech we were, navigating the wilderness with all our gadgets. Around noon, we reached the base of the hill leading to an old fire tower. Just a metal skeleton now, unused for decades. Eric wanted to explore, so we left our packs by a tree and started climbing the narrow path. The forest was quiet, with only distant bird calls and the crunch of dry leaves beneath our feet. At the tower, the view stretched for miles, trees rolling out under the blue sky, with the city barely visible on the horizon. I pulled out my GPS to mark our location, but the unit flickered and went blank. I tried turning it off and on. Nothing. Eric's GPS was doing the same thing. We both knew the batteries were new, but I still swapped them between units. No luck. Eric grabbed his radio and tried to check in. "Dispatch, this is Eagle 1. Do you copy?" His voice sounded hesitant. No response. I tried my radio too. Silence. Something felt off. We looked at each other, then scanned the surrounding forest. The quiet seemed unnatural now. We were pretty sure some glitch was affecting our devices. Maybe the hill was interfering with signals. We decided to continue to the tower platform, hoping cell phones might work or the radios would come back. At the platform, we took a break and looked around. Nothing seemed unusual. But as the sun began to lower around 5 p.m., Eric pointed up. "Hey, look at the sky. Do you see that?" I looked up, and the stars were shifting in the blue twilight, their patterns twisting into something unfamiliar. Eric and I had spent countless nights outdoors, but this was different. The constellations were moving, almost as if someone was deliberately rearranging them. At first, I thought it was my imagination, maybe clouds or city light playing tricks. But Eric confirmed what I was seeing. "Look," he said, "Orion isn't Orion anymore." The stars realigned into geometric shapes I'd never seen before. My watch showed the time, but something felt off. When I tried to photograph the strange sky, my phone froze. A tight anxiety began building in my chest. We stayed on the tower, watching the celestial transformation. The silence was profound. No forest sounds broke the stillness. No rustling leaves, no bird calls, no insect buzz. It was as if the entire landscape was holding its breath. The sun had dropped below the tree line, darkness closing in quickly. The trail back would be steep and challenging, especially with our GPS now useless. We packed up, relying on compasses and memory to guide us down. Halfway down the trail, a soft white glow caught my eye near the tower. It hovered just above the trees, unlike any flashlight or lantern. When I pointed it out, Eric suggested it might be a plane or drone. But there was no sound. We quickened our pace, the mysterious light remaining constant behind us. As we rounded the final bend before the trailhead, an uneasy feeling settled over us. Something was definitely not right. An hour into our hike, something felt off. The sun should have set, but dusk lingered like the light had been reset. Eric and I both noticed and mentioned it, but neither of us could explain what was happening. Back at the car, the GPS and radio suddenly came back to life as if nothing unusual had occurred. Eric's only comment was, maybe we shouldn't come back here after dark. I silently agreed. The drive home felt heavy, like the woods were closing in behind us. That night, I repeatedly checked the photos from earlier, but they showed nothing extraordinary, just blurry forest shots with no evidence of the strange occurrence. I've shared the story with a few friends, but mostly I keep it to myself. What we saw that day remains a mystery, and now, whenever I look at the stars, I can't help but wonder if they're truly where I think they are. We were out on Lake Almanor in our small motorboat, Emily and I. It was late August, early evening, that magical time when the sun is just dipping and the light softens. The water was calm, the air warm but cooling, and a profound quiet surrounded us, broken only by the motor's hum and a distant loon's call. We don't usually stay out this late, but Emily wanted to catch the sunset from the lake's center. She loves those tranquil moments when everything slows down, and after a hectic work week, I appreciated the calm too. About a mile from the marina, Emily spotted something floating nearby. Initially, I mistook it for a reflection or floating trash. As we approached, I realized it was something else entirely, a soft, pale greenish glow hovering just above the water's surface. "What the hell?" Emily whispered, her eyes locked on the light. I nodded, keeping the boat slow and steady. The light hovered about 3 feet above the water, its shape difficult to define. It was round but irregular, like something translucent suspended just beneath the surface. I pulled back the throttle, and we drifted, watching. We were cruising the lake, getting closer to this strange, pulsing light. It moved slowly, almost like it was breathing. When we reached about 20 feet away, the light started sinking beneath the water. Emily leaned forward, her face a mix of tension and curiosity. "Wait, is it going under?" "Yeah," I replied, surprised myself. I scanned the surrounding water. No buoy, no boat, no rope, just this light slipping silently downward. What happened next was truly strange. The light vanished without a splash. Normally, even a small object hitting water creates some noise or ripple. This time, it was like the lake simply swallowed the light whole. The surface remained perfectly still for a moment before a ripple spread out from that exact spot. These waves moved with an unnatural smoothness, radiating outward in a way that felt too perfect compared to typical wind-driven lake ripples. Emily gripped the boat's edge. "Did you see that? No splash, but the water moved like something pushed it from underneath." I felt uneasy, but tried to rationalize it. We were in such an isolated, quiet place. Maybe it was just an unusual water current or an underwater animal. I cut the motor and grabbed my flashlight, pointing it where the light had disappeared. The water was dark and calm again, but those strange ripples kept spreading in slow, widening circles. We sat in silence, watching. Suddenly, the engine sputtered and died. I tapped the throttle, but it only coughed weakly. Perfect, I thought. Stranded in the middle of time, he lake at dusk with a dead motor. Emily reached for her phone, no signal, of course. We were too far out, surrounded by dense pine forest. Multiple attempts to restart the motor failed. The sky was fading fast, the last sunset colors replaced by a bluish-gray gloom that made the lake feel colder. "Okay," I said, trying to sound calm. "We'll have to row back." Emily nodded, pulling out the emergency oars. As we prepared to row, I glanced back at the spot where the light had sunk. For a split second, I thought I saw something move just beneath the surface, a shadow or shape passing by. but it vanished so quickly I couldn't be certain. Probably just a fish, I told myself. We were camped about 15 miles outside of Black, New Mexico, not too far from the restricted zone everyone in town quietly ignores. Low, dusty fences with rusted signs marked the boundary. No entry, and U.S. government property. Warnings that didn't even bother with cameras because nobody was supposed to be out there anyway. My girlfriend Lacey had discovered this campsite on an overlanding forum, a flat patch near an arroyo, perfect for stargazing with little chance of interruption. We drove out in my old Tacoma, tent packed in the truck. Later, out on the lake, we started rowing towards shore, slow and steady, cutting through the quiet water. After a few minutes, Emily broke the silence. "Mark, did you hear that?" I stopped rowing and listened. A low humming noise emerged from the water itself, not the boat. Faint but definite, almost like a vibrating tone beneath the surface. "Yeah," I said, "I hear it." This wasn't like any motor or engine I knew, more a steady, unchanging pitch. We kept rowing, both glancing around nervously. As we got closer to the shore, the humming faded. When we finally reached the dock, I got out and pulled the boat in. The moment my feet hit solid ground, the noise stopped completely. Emily and I sat on the dock, just staring at the water. "I don't know what that was," she said quietly. "Me neither." We loaded up the boat and drove home in silence. That night, an unsettling feeling lingered. Something had been watching us. Not from the trees or shore, but from beneath the water, or maybe just above the sky. The next day, I checked the boat and motor thoroughly. Nothing was wrong. No leaks, no clogs, no mechanical problems. It started right up like nothing had happened. I thought about calling someone at the Marine or local ranger station, but hesitated. What would I say? That we saw a glowing thing sink under the lake without a splash, and the motor died right after? I didn't want to sound crazy. Weeks later, Emily and I returned to the lake. Everything seemed normal. No glowing, no hum, no silent ripples. But sometimes when the wind is still and dusk settles in, I think about that light sinking without a sound, the ripples spreading like something alive or watching. And I wonder if it's still there, just beneath the surface, waiting. We went camping in mid-June, when the heat doesn't let up even after dark. No clouds, just dry wind. My girlfriend Lacey, our dog Hubble, and I pulled up just before sunset and set up camp. We cooked a simple dinner on the propane burner, beans and tortillas. No phone signal out here, which was exactly why we came. Just us and the quiet. Around 10:30, we climbed into the tent. The truck's metal was still popping as it cooled down. Hubble curled up between us on the sleeping bags. Our plan was to wake early and hike one of the dry riverbeds before the heat became unbearable. I remember waking once during the night to relieve myself. The stars looked unreal, like someone had punched holes in a black paper. Standing behind the truck for wind cover, I found everything eerily still and warm. Nothing seemed out of place. The strange part started at dawn, around 6:30. The sky was turning pale blue way, and I unzipped the tent and immediately noticed all 4 truck doors were wide open. Driver's side, passenger side, both rear doors, just hanging open like someone had forgotten everything. At first, I thought I might have left them unlocked. Maybe the wind had blown them, but there was no wind, and I knew I hadn't left a single door open, let alone all 4. Lacey asked if I'd gotten something from the truck overnight. I said no. Hubble was acting weird, pacing in circles near the front bumper, then sitting and staring at the passenger door like he was waiting for something. I checked the truck. Everything inside was untouched. Cooler full, glove box closed, keys still in my bag in the tent. But the ground around the truck was completely smooth, just our previous day's footprints. No new prints, no tire marks, no drag marks, no animal tracks. Nothing. The ground was sand, soft enough that anything heavier than a rabbit would have left a trace. Hubble's morning prints were clear, but around the truck, nothing. We broke camp quickly that morning, skipping breakfast entirely. The blue sky hung motionless above us, empty and silent. As I rolled up the tent, something caught my eye about 200 yards east, near the arroyo's edge. A wooden fence post stood out against the sand, looking oddly new and deliberately placed. Walking over, I examined the post more closely. It was freshly cut, with no signs of weathering or age. Someone had jammed it into the ground at an angle, and wrapped a roughly torn strip of tin foil around its top. I didn't touch it, just observed for a moment before returning to our gear. We left by 7:15, and during the drive home, Lacey mentioned something strange. She'd woken up in the night, hearing a low humming sound, like distant machinery or an electrical transformer. She'd thought it was just in her head and hadn't wanted to wake me. Hubble was unusually restless. Normally he'd sleep instantly when we started driving, but this time he sat upright, staring out the window and occasionally letting out a short, low whine. Back in town, we checked the truck carefully. Everything seemed normal. Doors worked, locks clicked, nothing was missing, not even the gas. But the dome light was completely burned out, with the plastic cover cracked and the bulb bearing a faint black smear. That night at Lacey's place, Hubble became agitated again. Around 2 a.m., he paced quietly between the front door and bedroom. When I looked through the blinds, expecting to see some animal, there was nothing. Returning to the room, I noticed my backpack from the trip sitting in the corner, with a single line of sand across its top zipper, as if someone had deliberately dragged a finger across it. The backpack was caked with fine dirt, sand tracing across its fabric. Since returning, I'd left it zipped and untouched, propped by the door. Without a word to Lacey, I brushed off the dirt and shoved it into the closet. Days later, driving past the old service road to our campsite, I spotted fresh tire tracks. These weren't ours, wider and deeper, suggesting a heavier vehicle had passed through after us. I didn't investigate further. We haven't returned to that area since. Late summer night in eastern Montana, hauling freight from Seattle to Minneapolis. The highway stretched endlessly, barely any traffic, flat fields and sparse trees on either side. A sliver of moon hung in a sky partially covered by thin clouds. Hours of driving had worn me down, that familiar road fatigue creeping in around 11:30 p.m. Jeb, my older mutt, mostly black with a white chest patch, snoozed in the bunk. He's quiet but good company on long, lonely miles. Glancing at the GPS, I saw 300 miles left to the next rest area, near Miles City. I planned to keep driving when suddenly, a massive white light flashed across the horizon. Not lightning, no thunder, just an intense burst like an enormous camera flash. I braked hard, pulling onto the gravel shoulder and cutting the engine. Jeb stirred but remained silent. Scanning the sky, I waited. No repeat flash, no sounds, no aircraft lights. The radio stayed quiet. Checking the gauges, everything seemed normal. Just absolute silence. As I leaned back, something felt off. The usual nighttime insect buzz had vanished completely. The silence was absolute. No wind, no rustling grass, just dead, still air. I was sitting in my truck, Jeb curled up on my knee, when I finally checked the clock, 1:15 a.m. I figured I'd been there about 20 minutes after seeing that strange flash earlier. Starting the engine, I pulled back onto the empty highway. The clear sky and open road felt somehow wrong. Around 3 a.m., I stopped at a rest area, grabbed some coffee, and let Jeb stretch his legs in the parking lot. Later, when I reviewed the GPS log, things got weird. The tracker showed the truck had been completely motionless for 1 hour and 47 minutes, not the 20 minutes I remembered. My phone's time matched the truck's clock, but something didn't make sense. I called Nate, a tech-savvy trucker friend, to ask about potential GPS glitches. He said it was unlikely, given the solid satellite coverage and my reliable device. I tried recalling every detail: the flash, the silence, that strange feeling of time slipping. No radio chatter, no other vehicles, no lights, just a dark sky with scattered stars and that single, unexplained bright flash. During the drive, I kept checking the GPS. The time log was crystal clear. Nearly 2 hours of stillness I couldn't explain. That night in the motel, Jeb was restless. He paced, ears twitching, growling at the darkness outside. I couldn't sleep either. Other truckers said it was a normal night. He's walled, but nothing felt normal to me. I don't know what happened out there. Did I see something? Was I alone? The logs show I stopped, saw a flash, and sat there. But how could almost 2 hours vanish when I only remember 20 minutes? Now, Jeb and I still make our runs. We just avoid that particular highway stretch. Here's the rewritten text. Northern Wisconsin isn't known for excitement, and Lake Woodson is about as ordinary as they come. My name is Tom Granger, and I've spent countless nights fishing these calm, dark waters. It's a ritual I've always loved. Just me, my fishing rod, and the quiet. Whiskey, my scruffy mutt, is my usual companion. He's not much for swimming, but enjoys watching the water from the dock. One cool September evening, we headed out around 9:30 p.m., the air heavy with the promise of an approaching storm. Stars dotted the clear sky, and a gentle wind made the water shimmer softly. We settled on the far end of the dock, where it stretches over the lake's deepest point. Trees on the distant shore blocked the wind, keeping the water unnaturally still. I cast my line and poured some coffee from my thermos, while Whiskey curled up at my feet, half asleep. The night was peaceful, just occasional fish splashes and distant owl calls. About an hour into our fishing, something strange caught my eye. A faint glow appeared near the water's surface, right about 30 feet away. It wasn't like a normal light, more like a dim, diffuse glow, as if a glow stick had been dropped just beneath the surface. What struck me was how absolutely motionless the water remained around this light. Curiosity piqued. I leaned forward. The glow was a pale greenish white, unchanging and eerily still. I shone my flashlight toward it, expecting some reaction. Nothing happened. The light stayed exactly the same. Whiskey's ears twitched, his attention locked on the spot. Then, slowly, the light began to rise above the water's surface. Maybe that's for the best. The lake was perfectly still when something started rising from beneath the water. At first, it looked like a bubble, but it wasn't. A smooth, round object began to glow brighter as it ascended, leaving the water's surface completely undisturbed. No ripples, no waves, nothing. I blinked hard, thinking it might disappear or be a trick of light. But it kept rising, reaching about 10 feet above the surface before drifting horizontally away from the dock. Instinctively, I dropped my fishing rod and grabbed my phone to capture the moment. As I tried to focus the camera, the screen mysteriously dimmed and went completely black. Whiskey, my dog, growled softly with raised hackles, and a chill ran down my spine despite the mild evening. The glowing orb continued its silent, steady journey across the sky, moving in a smooth arc as if following an invisible path. My heart raced as I tracked its movement until it simply faded away, not with a dramatic burst, but gently, like a lamp being switched off. The entire encounter lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Afterward, the lake remained eerily calm, with no evidence of any disturbance. I sat back down, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. Whiskey stayed close, his ears swiveling toward the surrounding trees, still tense. I kept checking my phone, hoping it would come back to life, but the screen remained black. My thermos had gone cold, and my hands trembled slightly. For the rest of the night, I watched the sky, but nothing else appeared. Just the usual sounds of crickets, wind, and occasional distant splashes. The next morning, I shared my experience with my neighbor Greg, an experienced local fisherman. He didn't dismiss my story, simply saying, "Sometimes the lake has its mysteries, and that part of the world can play tricks on you after dark." I asked around town, and a woman named Elsie mentioned seeing a faint light near the lake that same night, though she thought it might have been a flashlight or teenagers messing around. I tried to find a rational explanation. Bioluminescent algae didn't seem likely, and no one else had seen anything quite like what I described. The mystery remained, hanging in the air like the unexplained light that had drifted across the lake that night. I was alone that week, my wife visiting her sister. It was early September, a Thursday morning after a string of hot days when a cool front finally rolled in overnight. Around 6, I followed my usual routine, making coffee, feeding the dogs, and heading out to check the pasture before tackling the fencing repair I'd been avoiding. Our property stretches about 40 acres, mostly open pasture with some woods near the south end. That morning, something caught my eye maybe 50 yards from the back gate, a perfect square burned into the grass, 10 feet by 10 feet, with sharp, straight corners. The grass inside looked different, brittle and dead, as if microwaved, not blackened or charred, just dry, like mid-July after weeks without rain. I walked around it twice, searching for any signs. No tracks, no tire marks, no footprints. When I bent down and touched the grass, it crumbled under my fingers. Not like ash, just lifeless. A faint smell hung in the air, something between ozone and static, almost metallic. Not overpowering, but definitely present. The sky above was clear. Nights at the lake have been strange since then. No boats, no fishing lights, nothing moving on the water's surface. Something would rise up, glowing bright and steady, yet the lake remained unnaturally still. The air felt different that night, thicker, heavier somehow. I've returned to the lake several times, sometimes with Whiskey, sometimes alone. My dog Whiskey won't go near the dock after dark anymore, staying close to shore and avoiding looking out over the water. The light didn't harm anything. It simply appeared, drifted across the sky, and vanished without a trace. But on certain nights, and the wind is just right and the lake is perfectly still, I could swear I see a faint glow waiting just beneath the surface. My phone still works fine. No blackouts, no dead screens. I'm not sure what that light was, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. The first hint something was off came when I noticed a strange square in the middle of the pasture. No lightning, no scorching, just dry powdery soil without any chemical traces, only a faint ozone smell. My neighbor Joe came by later that day, kicked around the edge with his boot, and suggested it might be kids with a drone playing a prank. But something felt different that night. Around 2 a.m., the dogs started whining, not barking, just a low, unsettling sound. They stood at the back door with ears back and tails down, staring intently toward the field. This wasn't normal. Usually, they'd bark at anything moving, raccoons, coyotes, even the wind. I stepped outside into an eerie silence. The moonlight was bright enough to see, and that square remained unchanged, darker now, but still distinct. Nothing moved. After waiting several minutes, I went back inside, and the dogs followed, curling up quietly under the kitchen table. The next morning, the square was still there, dry and unchanged. I took some pictures, but they didn't reveal much, just a brown patch in the grass that would look ordinary to anyone not knowing what to look for. Strange things started happening. My phone battery died by noon, dropping from 80% to 0 despite minimal use. It charged unusually slowly. The kitchen wall clock was mysteriously 10 minutes off, though its battery seemed fine. That evening, I brought a lawn chair to the pasture's edge. Around 10 p.m., I began seeing small lights moving low across the ground. There were no roads in that direction, just open pasture and woods. These weren't headlights. Something else was going on. The dog's behavior, the unexplained square, the electrical oddities, something wasn't right. And I was determined to figure out what. I noticed the strange lights first. Quick, small pulses moving side to side and up and down. They weren't like people walking with flashlights. Too smooth, too deliberate. No sound accompanied them. I watched for about 20 minutes until they faded. The dogs never barked, just stared at the fence the entire time. 2 days later, the square remained unchanged. The grass was still brittle and dry, but something felt different around the area. A subtle shift I couldn't quite explain. Outside the square, the grass grew faster and looked healthier, as if the soil had received some kind of boost. Yet inside the square, everything stayed dead. I checked with my moisture meter from the hayfields. The readings inside the square were almost 0, while just outside, they were normal, even slightly higher in some spots. That afternoon, walking the fence line, I heard a low hum. It reminded me of a distant diesel engine idling steadily. When I turned to look, nothing was there. No dust, no headlights. The hum stopped abruptly, like someone flipping a switch. Back at the barn, the power flickered briefly. Just a few seconds of interruption. The radio reset, and the electric fence controller blinked as if it had lost connection. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I felt watched, constantly getting up to check the windows. The dogs paced silently, never barking. Around 3 a.m., I saw the square glowing softly from my bedroom window. A faint shimmer, similar to heat rising from pavement, but more consistent. With my flashlight, I went onto the porch. When the light hit the square, the shimmer vanished. The grass looked unchanged. The dogs stayed back as I walked out and crouched down, touching the dirt. Still dry, but the air felt slightly warmer, like standing near a heating vent. I listened, complete silence. No wind, no sex, just quiet. By morning, the shimmer was gone without a trace. The square looked even more stripped, as if something had completely extracted its moisture and color. I avoided the area after that, keeping the dogs away and not discussing it. A week later, it rained, a steady, good rainfall that lasted all afternoon. The square on my property remains a mystery. After the storm, everything was drenched except this one spot. Months have passed, and the grass still hasn't grown back. At night, I sometimes catch a brief hum that vanishes as quickly as it appears. When I hear it, I stay inside, and so do the dogs. We wait it out. No tracks, no overhead movement, just this persistent, unchanging square. During a routine check of trail camera footage after my ranger shift, something unusual caught my attention. The cameras were set up along a popular hiking trail in the national park, typically capturing wildlife like deer, raccoons, and the occasional coyote. But this time was different. 3 consecutive photos taken around 2:30 a.m. were completely black. No animals, no light, just pure darkness. Initially, I suspected a camera malfunction or damaged memory card. The timestamps showed the black photos were taken about 15 seconds apart, which was normal for the camera. The audio recording was even stranger. When I tried to play it, the sound file became corrupted. At those moments, loud, rhythmic clicks filled the audio, not like animal noises or static. These clicks were unnervingly precise, a steady, almost mechanical pattern. Click, 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 click. For about a minute, this sequence repeated with impossible regularity. I checked the camera carefully. No physical damage. It was still securely attached to the tree branch where we'd mounted it a month earlier. The batteries were fine. Something was off, but I couldn't explain what. The next morning, I decided to investigate the location in person. The trail was quiet, early spring, with few visitors around. When I returned to the exact camera location, everything looked completely normal. No scratches, no marks, nothing that suggested any interference. The surrounding area was undisturbed, no footprints or broken branches that would hint someone had been tampering with the equipment. Standing there, I felt a bit uneasy. The woods were dense, but morning sunlight filtered through the trees, creating an outwardly calm scene. Those black images and strange clicks kept nagging at me. Over the next few days, I methodically reviewed footage from nearby cameras, searching for anything unusual. Nothing turned up. Every other photo and sound file appeared completely standard. Just animals moving, wind rustling leaves, distant bird calls. No more black images or weird clicks. About a week later, I was back in the office when another ranger called. He reported strange stories from hikers on that same trail during late-night hours. People described hearing bizarre noises, rhythmic tapping or clicking sounds emerging from deep within the woods. No one had actually seen anything, just heard these unexplained sounds. I hesitated to share the camera footage, uncertain whether it was related or if someone was fabricating stories. But the timing felt too coincidental to dismiss. That night, I decided to investigate the trail myself. I started hiking around midnight, carrying a flashlight, extra batteries, and my radio. The forest remained quiet, punctuated only by my footsteps on the dirt path and occasional distant owl hoots. Halfway down the trail, I detected something unusual. Initially uncertain, I wondered if it was wind or branches scraping together. Then the sound repeated, clear and steady. Click, 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 click. The faint noise came from somewhere near a cluster of tall pines off the trail. Though not loud, it carried through the still air like a slow, measured tapping. I stopped walking, switched off my flashlight, and listened intently. The clicks continued, evenly spaced. Sweeping my light beam across the trees, I tried locating the source. Nothing was visible, no animals, no people. After a minute, the clicking ceased. I waited a bit longer, but silence returned. Unwilling to venture deeper into the dark woods alone, I slowly turned back, my heart racing. Throughout the return hike, I felt watched, yet each time I glanced over my shoulder, nothing was there. The trails had been quiet lately, but that night was different. The camera footage showed 3 mysterious black photos nestled among normal images. When I zoomed in on the surrounding shots, a blurry shape near the frame's edge caught my attention, though it was too dark to make out any details. During my shifts at the ranger station, I'd been hearing strange clicks. Other rangers brushed it off, woodpeckers, maybe some unknown animal behavior. But something felt off. I ran the audio through a spectrogram, which revealed clear, regular spikes. No specialists could identify the sound. It didn't match any known animal calls or equipment interference. Weeks passed. The hiker reports stopped and the trail returned to normal. The clicks vanished during my shifts. Yet late at night, when I'm reviewing footage or walking alone, I sometimes hear a faint clink in the distance, just enough to make me turn my head. I've kept the camera and footage stored in my office. Those 3 black photos and the corrupted sound file haunt me. I keep hoping to find a clue I missed. What was out there that night? Something that didn't show up in images but left behind a sound that didn't belong. It was early morning, just after dawn. Me and Nate had reached the ridge around 5:30 before the sun fully rose. Mid-30s and cold, with woods still damp from overnight frost. We were elk hunting, having seen little the previous day, so we moved east toward the open timber, walking slow, silent, watching the ground for fresh signs. The light filtered through branches, that gray-blue color just before turning golden. I was about 20 feet behind Nate when he stopped suddenly. Something caught his attention, but I couldn't see what. Nate stopped dead in his tracks, arm out, signaling me to freeze. 30 yards ahead on a narrow trail, a doe stood motionless in a patch of brush. Something felt off immediately. The deer wasn't behaving normally. One leg raised mid-step, completely still, not twitching an ear. Its head was tilted upward, not looking at us, but staring above us. We watched, unmoving, for what seemed like an eternity. The deer didn't blink, didn't shift, just stared straight up. Following its gaze, I scanned the sky. At first, nothing seemed unusual. A few wispy clouds caught the early sunlight against a mostly clear backdrop. But right above the tree line, where the deer's focus remained fixed, a shape materialized. Not glowing or illuminated, just pure black. Unlike any aircraft or bird, it resembled a wedge, not sharp, just a dark triangle suspended silently. Low enough that any sound would have been audible, yet absolutely no noise broke the eerie silence. This wasn't a shadow or cloud formation. It blocked the stars behind it, creating a void where starlight should have been. Looking slightly left or right revealed a clear, star-filled sky, but where this object hung, nothing existed. A strange pressure filled my ears, similar to altitude changes, though we weren't anywhere high. It felt like being underwater, making me swallow repeatedly. Nate whispered, "You see that?" I nodded, though unsure if he noticed. Suddenly, the deer jerked its head down, looking disoriented. In an instant, it bolted into the brush without acknowledging our presence. The moment shattered. Nate shot me a bewildered glance. Looking back up, I noticed the black shape had subtly rotated. We'd been at the cabin for a few days, just the 3 of us, me, my wife, and our son Jake. It's out in the middle of nowhere, really remote, no cell service, just the kind of place where you drive for miles through dense woods to get there. We liked it for the quiet, away from everything. The plan was to disconnect, relax, and let Jake run around without worry. The first couple of nights were normal, nothing weird. Just the usual sounds, crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional owl. But the 3rd night, something happened that I've been trying to figure out ever since. We were sitting outside around the fire pit. Jake was roasting marshmallows, and my wife and I were just talking, sipping some coffee. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright because there's no light pollution out there. It was peaceful, exactly what we came for. Something caught my eye. Not spinning, but just a very slow pivot, like the edge of it was turning away. Still no sound. We stood there for another minute, maybe 2, long enough for the light to change a little. Then it just wasn't there anymore. I didn't see it move. I didn't see it shrink or fade. I blinked and it was just gone. We stayed out a few more hours that morning, but we didn't see anything. No elk, no deer, no birds. Even the squirrels were quiet. I remember Nate remarking how still everything felt, like the forest was holding its breath. Back at camp, we didn't really talk about it. We both kind of danced around it like neither of us wanted to be the one to bring it up directly. I think we both were hoping it would seem less weird if we ignored it. That night, we heard something walking near the edge of camp. It wasn't close, but it was heavy enough to hear the crunch of twigs. Probably a moose, we told ourselves. We didn't go check. The next morning, we packed up early. We'd originally planned to stay through Sunday, but we both kind of mutually decided we'd seen enough. Nate just said, "Let's try a different area next time." On the drive out, maybe an hour after leaving camp, we saw another deer standing by the side of the road. Another doe. It was facing the tree line, not looking at us, not eating, just standing there, head slightly up, same posture. We passed it slow, didn't stop. Nate didn't say anything until we were another mile down the road. He just said it looked the same. And yeah, it did. My wife pointed toward the trees on the far edge of the clearing. At first, the darkness swallowed everything. Then, slowly a light emerged, a small, glowing sphere rising just above the treetops. This wasn't like any flashlight or lantern. The sphere was smooth, perfectly round, with a soft, steady light that was white but tinged with blue at the edges. It hovered about 50 feet above us, moving up inch by inch. No sound accompanied it, no buzzing, no humming, nothing. I strained to hear something, but only the fire behind me crackled. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks. Jake stopped mid-marshmallow toast, staring wide-eyed. My wife looked equally bewildered. The sphere remained unchanged, just hanging motionless in the sky. We sat frozen, silent for what felt like a minute. A strange unease crept through me. Not panic, but that unsettling feeling where your body wants to flee, but your mind struggles to comprehend what you're seeing. Suddenly, without warning, the sphere rocketed straight up like a bullet. Faster than anything I'd ever witnessed, it vanished into the sky in an instant, leaving no trail, no noise. We remained stunned. My watch showed only 30 seconds had passed since its appearance, but something felt off, like time itself was distorted. Jake whispered, "Did you see that?" My wife nodded, her face pale. The next day brought more mystery. Jake discovered strange marks near the cabin's edge, circular indentations about 2 feet wide, pressed into the dirt. No footprints, no signs of dragging, just these precise, unevenly spaced circles leading toward the woods. We considered a fallen branch, but the circles were too perfect, with no broken wood nearby. That night, I awoke around 3 a.m., unable to sleep. Something felt different outside. Peering out the window, I saw the forest was still. In the distance, a faint light flickered behind the trees, small but unmistakable. What was it? I had no answer. The first night, I saw something that didn't look steady like a campfire. It moved slowly along the tree line just below the canopy, never breaking through the branches. No blinking, no color change, just a smooth, gliding motion. I called my wife quietly, but by the time she looked, the light had vanished. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but something didn't feel right. I couldn't go back to bed. By the third night, the air felt heavy, like unseen eyes were watching us. We huddled close together, and the fire burned brighter than before. Then it appeared again. Same spot, same silent rise above the trees. This time it lingered, 2 or 3 minutes at least. I watched it pulse gently, the light thickening and thinning in waves, almost like a breath. Jake whispered, "It's watching us." I wanted to argue, to say it was just a strange light, but deep down, I knew I wasn't certain. When the sphere finally shot up and disappeared, my wife said we should pack up and leave tomorrow. We packed in silence the next day, a quiet tension hanging between us. Driving away, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that sphere again, but the sky remained empty. I still don't understand what we saw or why it was there. Those nights changed something. The woods no longer felt like home, but like a place where we weren't welcome. Months have passed, and in quiet moments, I swear I can still see a faint glow just beyond the trees. I apologize, but it seems like the text you intended to share is incomplete or was not fully copied. Could you please provide the full text you would like me to rewrite? I'll be happy to help you once I have the complete original script.